We're good. Calling to order this version of the Parowan City Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for November 20th, 2024. It's 6:00 p.m. Thank you all for showing up. The first item of business on our agenda is declaration of conflicts from commission members with any agenda item.
No.
I have a conflict with, number 5.
Right, okay. So tell us your intention. Will you participate in discussion and not vote, or?
I won't participate in discussion or voting.
Okay. And I'm declaring a conflict with, for myself, for Juniper Hills subdivision, and I will participate in the discussions, but I will not vote.
Do either of you want to say the nature of the conflict, or just wondering?
My conflict is, based on the personal relationship I have with the, petitioners.
And I'll just say I have a close acquaintance and relationship with the some of the principals in the Juniper Hills subdivision. All right, our next, any other conflicts, Weston? You're good? Okay, Heather, I got you. Okay, approval of the minutes from, I'm going to start here. Our first ones are October 16th, 2024. These came kind of late for us. If you're not comfortable, say so, and we can hold those to the next meeting if we need to. I have a couple of small changes. And I think we probably ought to do these one at a time. So let's do October 16th, 2024. Comments, changes? I'd accept a motion regarding the meeting minutes from October 16th, 2024.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from October 16th, 2024.
All in favor? Oh, I'll need a second, sorry.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes carry it. Thank you. The next set is, let's see, we'll call it the 5 p.m. to 6:30 joint session with the City Council. Any comments, concerns? I'd entertain a motion at this point regarding the minutes for November 6, 2024, 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. joint meeting.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from November 6, 2024, from the 5 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. meeting.
I
Good.
second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes carry. Thank you. So on this last set, we're looking at the minutes from November 6th, 2024, 6:30 p.m., the regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. I have a couple comments. I have just a general comment about these minutes. I know these are probably AI generated. They're really, really basic. They're not inaccurate. They're just, I find them to be very, very basic. And when they come really, really late in time for us to review, sometimes it's hard to go back and try and remember or figure out if there's anything that we should add to these. That said, on page 2 of the set of minutes, on the one to the third paragraph, the middle line there, it starts out, restrictions of topography influencing density and meaning adjustments in planning on the city's master plan influenced. I have no idea. I know that's not what was said, and I don't know what was said, but we need to correct that because it doesn't make sense the way it's written. I wonder if we can look back at that, and bring it back to the next meeting. Again, I'm not contesting it other than, to read that and I go, is that really what was said? The word meaning, is where it starts to fall apart for me. Well, considering my comment about the minutes are pretty basic and brief, I'd rather not take anything away. I'd rather go back and get it figured out, please. Then as we go farther down, where we talk about adjournment, I take exception to the wording that says, as meeting time progressed, a motion to adjourn was proposed. That's not inaccurate, but, really, business was finished and we adjourned the meeting. We didn't. You also talked about how late it was, so that's probably what it said. Okay. But we didn't table anything, we finished our business.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, I prefer that we hold these minutes till the next meeting and that we, as a minimum, get a read on that third paragraph on the second page.
So do we need to make a motion to table it till next meeting?
Yes.
I make a motion that we table the approval of the minutes for the November 6th, 2024, 6:30 meeting of Planning and Zoning Commission.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can I just make a brief comment on minutes from a legal standpoint? And sometimes it's like the old Bob's, and I'm a minute taker for an association, the Bob Seger song, What to Leave In and What to Leave Out. And there's been a lot written about minute taking, if you can believe it. And if the goal is not 35 pages, because some people take minutes and they're literally 35 pages long, and then, Commission Member Bonnet said, I object, and then there was a discussion, and then they came. So the whole idea is just to get the gist of what was said, because sometimes too much is not good from a literally from a legal standpoint, for interpretation purposes. Some people take minutes, no action was taken. This was discussed, no action was taken, and they don't have any dialogue or comment back and forth. So, you know, I don't know. I'm not coming to Callie's defense because she knows what she's doing, but I didn't find a problem with them from my standpoint. That's all I wanted to say.
So what is the legal record of the meeting?
What's that?
What is considered the legal record of the meeting?
Well, I mean, some people say, I made a comment, and so on page 2, paragraph 3, I distinctly remember saying, I don't agree with Commissioner Hoyt, and I think we should do ABC. But if it's not germane or relevant to the ultimate outcome or decision made by the body, it's like fluff, and it's like then subject to interpretation. And then if you're in a lawsuit later, somebody said, oh, you know what? We had one commission member who saw the problem, and so the whole idea is to cover the agenda items, try and include a brief discussion of what occurred, but if no action was taken, I mean, the real important part is a vote was taken to do this. But as far as what you said and what she said, and, you know, it's not.
You're a good lawyer, I think, because you did not answer my question, but you said a lot.
I didn't even know the relevance of your question. What was your question?
My question is, what is the legal record of a city council meeting or a planning and zoning meeting?
The legal record?
Uh-huh.
Well, that's rhetorical, Larry. You know the answer to that.
I don't know if I do.
It would be the minutes.
And which minutes is it? The written minutes or the video or the audio?
It would be the written minutes.
Okay, so I grasp what you said about detail and so on. However,
Right? But
you can go, there's other information from other people in other places that say that is the legal record of your meeting. They need to
Right.
be as accurate as possible.
as taken by the clerk, not your recollection and not what you think. I mean, you made some suggestions, but others could have said, no, that's not how I recall it, and then we could have a debate upon whether or not your changes that you suggest were accurate. Because I might say, no, I don't recall it that way, Larry, and that's not what happened.
I think what was brought up is that paragraph is just not clear, 'cause it was AI generated, so maybe we need to figure out, just for clarification of, is it important or is it not? Because it was 2 weeks ago, the meeting,
Right?
and I can't tell you exactly what that paragraph was saying and
Well,
what it was referring to.
AI
No.
generated with her review, and sometimes we don't always get it right as a minute taker myself. I mean, it's not a big deal, but the comment that I was addressing is very simply, they seem very basic, and I found that to be a positive comment, not a detraction from the.
Well, I just take it as a comment, but I'm
Okay.
looking at it.
All right.
I see some benefit to having a record of the discussion that was had. Would it be impermissible to have a second record that's more detailed? That's not reviewed and there's no motion that it be made the official.
The second record would be what we
The
put on
video.
YouTube.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
it would be YouTube, the video.
If somebody wants to go back through and review the meeting, they can just watch it on YouTube.
Well, and AI is capable of
I mean, we
generating
have the
another
recording.
level of, excuse me.
You have the
Um,
recording, right? I mean, you could take a 5-hour meeting that we had, and we could all argue about what should be in the minutes. You could do a transcript, but somewhere between a transcript and, I've seen minutes called to order, the chairman called to order, declaration, the conflict. Valley Heights minor lot subdivision, discussion was had by the commission, no action taken. So, I mean, but, and then you could, I suppose, have a recording if somebody wanted to go back and look at everything. But the minutes aren't supposed to be a transcript or a long description of what everybody said and who agreed and who didn't, and then no action taken.
And that's good, I understand that.
Yeah.
And in this case, they're not even close to being a transcript, so we
Yeah,
don't have a
I got
problem.
it, I got it.
Thank you. So I think we were in the middle of a vote, and the motion was to hold these minutes for the correction on page 2.
Oh, let me, as she read her motion, I realized that I'm listed as having attended it, and I was not there.
Is that important enough? Okay.
The,
Yeah.
I was at the, October, or,
The one before that.
16th or
the
something?
16th, I arrived for the meeting, but not for the training.
So, neither on the 6th.
Mm-mm.
You came, Troy, to that training and sat in the back. That combined meeting, is that what you're talking about?
No, that, I did come there on October 16th.
Was that the
not November.
16th?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we need to go back up and, make another motion to revise the minutes for, which meeting was it that?
October 6th, starting at 6:30.
November 6th.
November sixth.
Oh, I'm sorry.
November
I
6th.
have no idea what I just said.
The 5 to 6:30 one, he wasn't present, and then the 6th one, he wasn't present.
So we need a motion to make a correction to the motion we made, I guess? So the November 6th, 2024, 5 PM to 6:30? We need a
Oh,
motion.
'cause of Troy, okay,
Because
so,
Troy didn't make that one and he's listed.
okay, so I make a motion that we approve the minutes from November 6th, the 5 to 6:30 training meeting with Troy, removed from attendance.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. I think we're through the minutes now. The shortest minutes ever and the most amount of time we've ever spent on it. I don't know how that works, but we did it. Okay, at this point in the meeting, we've got a couple items coming up in the agenda. One is Valley Heights minor lot subdivision, and we also have a Juniper Hills subdivision. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor to public comment regarding the Valley Heights minor lot subdivision. When you come up, please state your name. You've got about 3 or 4 minutes to make your case.
Oh, I thought that's, we are the Valley Heights, so can we?
Yeah, if you're up to actually describe your project, you don't necessarily need to
I've just
do that at this point.
introduce ourselves and tell you how we got to this point,
Sure.
okay? Hi, I'm Barry Bush, my wife Charlene Bush. We own the property that's being discussed this evening for the last 20 years. We built our house 7 years ago. We absolutely love living in Parowan. It's paradise without a doubt. The reason we started this inquiry or asking questions about subdivision, started off with that, we were curious about an ADU. Charlene's mother is getting up in age, and we're looking to perhaps build a house for her to help her, because she lives in California currently and has a large home that's getting too big for her to manage. And so we came down to the city and we spoke to Keith, and Keith at the time said that there wasn't an ordinance currently available for ADUs, so they said that a lot split might be something that we could do. So we started that process, and so So we had it surveyed, and our engineer said that our property met the requirements and the criteria and guidelines to be divided, so we've brought it forward from that point. Half the lots in the Valley Heights Estates are 1 acre lots, and then the other half are a little over 2 acres. We are currently over the 2 acre portion, 2 point. So we feel that that conforms with the rest of the properties in the neighborhood, and we would really appreciate you approving our project. I'd like to thank you. We're here for any other questions. Charlene's going to tell you. We'll wait for further comment.
Thank you. Anybody else that's commenting on the Valley Heights minor lot subdivision? Okay. Anybody here to comment on the Juniper Hills subdivision? Doesn't look that way or sound that way. So at this point, I'm closing the meeting to public comment. So from here on out, we'll be hearing from sponsors of projects and from the commission. And we'll open up discussion now on the Valley Heights minor lot subdivision. That's at 1118 West, 575 South. And the parcel number is A-025, I'm sorry, yeah, A-2055-0011-00. And it is 2.11 acres. It is presently zoned rural estates. There were notices sent out that accompany this, that were, well, came back and now accompany this package. And as I look through this, I see that out of, looks like 16 that were sent out, there were 5 that came back with supportive with yeses. There was there's 2 neutrals, which means they didn't respond at all, and there's another couple neutrals that didn't respond, so about 4 neutrals. And then we had 1 no, and that was accompanied by comments. So I'm going to go through these real quick and just present the comments.
Larry, can I just real quick discuss the technical aspect of what we're considering tonight?
I would rather wait till we get through the comments.
Well, I just don't know if everybody realizes how the comments will apply. This isn't a subdivision, standard subdivision, but by all means, you're the chair. If you'd rather I don't, I won't.
Well, are you going to describe what the application is, or are you going to describe planning and zoning's role in this process?
I'm just going to describe the unique nature of what they're requesting. Of not get into the details of their request, just what we're talking about maybe doing tonight.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, this is within an existing subdivision. We don't subdivide within subdivisions other than by amending the current subdivision. What we are being asked to do is to amend the existing subdivision, a portion of it that only affects one person. If you remember, we did this recently for a subdivision by the freeway where they actually wanted to combine a lot.
Right.
We have to amend the existing plat that's there. So it's not just open property by meets and bounds, it's within a subdivision. So it's not the combining of parcels, it is the combining of lots. In this case, we're talking about taking an existing lot with an existing plat and pulling it out of that subdivision and creating a new plat for that area within that subdivision. So that's it's a very unique situation. That's all I wanted to point out.
Okay, no, thank you, that's certainly value added. Okay, that said, I'll go back to comments, so I have a comment here that says, we oppose this subdivision as this subdivision was plotted to contain only the allotted amount of houses and people. This corrupts the original plan. This same applicant, this is a bit long, but it has merit. We are responding to leave names out of these. We are responding to a request to subdivide a lot in Valley Heights subdivision. We are opposed to dividing such lot. We are opposing due to the following reasons. Additional subdividing of lots in the Valley Heights subdivision corrupts the original plan structure. The planning of Valley Heights Estates was to allow an allotted amount of land, structures, and footprint in a given acreage. To allow additional subdividing is taking away the intent of this neighborhood community of which we are living. Lots were created, sold, and purchased with the understanding that the area would have a maximum number of buildings and usage. Subdividing destroys this purpose. Number two, aesthetics, wildlife, environmental impact concerns to the area. Allowing additional subdividing will increase population and affect, minimize, or eliminate the quality of life and the environmental integrity of this area. This has already happened with the addition of houses and people currently building in Valley Heights. Deer, turkey, birds, blow snakes, and trees are disappearing from the subdivision, and an increase of mice, rats, and destructive squirrels are now invading. Item 3 is a precedent would be set in which any or all of the existing lots could be subdivided. If subdividing was denied to any resident, it could entail lawsuits as the request at this lot, 1118 West, 575 South, would have already been an established precedent. Conclusion, to allow subdividing of the proposed lot would defeat the original intent for the Valley Heights Estates subdivision and compromise the quality of life that our neighbors and community herein now share. Please say no to this request to subdivide. We are unable to attend the planning meeting, but appreciate your attention to our concerns and hearing our voice. As I move on, there's another that says we own the lot at 487 South, 1050 West, which are in the vicinity. We have no objection to you subdividing the above lot mentioned. I have another one from another neighbor that was noticed that says I support the subdivision. We have another one that I consider neutral because there's no comments and there's no approval or disapproval. There's another one that says, I have no objections to subdivision here. There's another one that says, the applicants are the best neighbors. We have no problem with their lot split decision. There's another that says, I approve of their plan to subdivide their lot for the stated purpose. And so on. And in fairness, I should read to you the letter that went out to the people that were notified. So it says, Dear neighbor, we would like to inform you that we are applying to subdivide our 2.11 acre lot at the address in Valley Heights subdivision to approximately 2 1-acre lots. We have had it surveyed and it meets the criteria for subdividing. At this point in time, we have no intention of selling or building on the lot. We are being proactive just in case. We need to build Charlene's mom a home close to us as she ages. We felt it would be a better fit for the neighborhood than a smaller ADU on the property. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, you may contact us. And that is pretty much the comment collection. Comments or questions at this point from commission members? So I'll go through my notes. So this particular decision on this application is going to result in a recommendation to the city council for action, because a positive recommendation will result in a subdivision plat modification, which is a legislative decision, as Dan mentioned. We have the parcel number already mentioned. We have notices sent out. So the challenge that I see to this application, one of the challenges, I should say, is the slope of the land. So it's clear in our rural estates zone that slopes between 0 and 8% require a minimum 1 acre lot. Lots with a slope greater than 8% and less than 30% require a 2 acre lot minimum. So if one were to really look at this subdivision and how it was created and look at the lay of the land, phase one was started at Old Highway 91 and proceeded, I don't know, with maybe 10 lots that were fairly flat. And then later, phase two was created, which picked up and abutted the south side of phase one, and then proceeded up the hill. And as they went up the hill, the lots, there was 1 or 2 1-acre lots, I believe, and then as it moved on, they proceeded to morph into 2-acre lots. And the reason for that is the requirement in rural estates and the slope. And so, for that reason, I'm suggesting that granting this lot split would be a direct violation of our 15.44.030 area requirements in the rural estates zone.
What is their slope, sorry?
Their slope averages 8.68% on only the lot that they want to subdivide. The problem is it's a 2-acre lot as it sits, and you have to look at the slope on the entire lot. So when you split a half acre of what I'll say less slope or flatter land off of a steeper piece, now you have a non-conforming lot because you end up with a 1-acre lot that exceeds the slope requirements.
What are you getting the steeper, where are you getting that from? Because we do have a diagram in front of us, but we don't have the slopes on that other half.
Right, the slopes, I'm sorry, they were provided by, you've got that there, right?
That's what I'm saying, but there's no slopes on the other piece, and you just said it's steeper.
Well, visually I went and looked at it.
Are we gonna go off of that?
We don't have to, we can get a survey. I mean, if we want to go through that.
Oh, you just said it like it was fact, and I was like, whoa, there's
well,
something we're missing.
I apologize. I mean, visually, I went and looked at that, and to me, it's clearly a steeper lot. It's farther up the hill. And I would say that, you know, if we think that it isn't, or that's not a fact, we would certainly be willing to table this until it can be determined.
Another question I have is, this is splitting it to 1 acre each approximately.
Right.
Then, are they bringing water?
Well,
Okay.
Yep.
pardon me? Well, sure.
When they do a split, does it create some other?
We were told that we would have to purchase water, or the city, when we, got it approved, then we would have to pay for the water rights. But we're not gonna do it until it gets approved,
Right.
yeah.
Well, wouldn't you have to bring water? I mean, in this case,
So if you remember, we did, The one exception to that was if we had a single lot that was being split to two, they could pay a water development fee,
Okay.
which is in lieu of bringing water.
So that's applicable to,
That would apply here.
okay.
And the only reason I asked Larry about the slope is, it seems like we're right on the edge of that 8%, where 'cause once it goes above 8, right, it's 0 to 8 is one thing,
8
9 and above, or
Eight.
8 point whatever and above,
8 to
puts you in a different category.
Right, 8 and above. We're at 8.68 average. We have some 9% slopes there, and we have a 7, to be fair.
He
And
did survey the entire property, all 2 acres.
Oh, we did?
He did,
We're looking at a diagram
yeah.
that shows effectively 2 new lots,
Mhm.
and the part where your existing house is blank on.
there's a handout down
So
there
the
if you wanna
plat-
see what we're looking at.
Yeah, I've got one. The
Oh,
plat should show, I mean, the, Mylar should show the whole thing, right? It doesn't? Okay. So what we did is we followed the direction from city staff on what we needed to do to qualify. And to be perfectly honest, when we first came to them at the beginning of this year, we were asking about an external ADU, and there wasn't code for that, and this was the option. So
Uh-huh.
we paid for the survey to have it done. We just wanna be prepared if we need to move
Mhm.
my mom closer to us and take care of her, because our home is not conducive to that. So,
Well, and I
this
understand.
is why we're here tonight.
Yes, I feel your pain,
Yeah.
is what I would say. So, the other challenge we have is the actual description of what the rural estate code says in regard its intent,
Mhm.
and so on. And so, as we go there, I would say, I'm not gonna make any promises or make any readings, but we have recently passed external ADU code.
Right.
My recommendation is that you revisit that with the city, because my belief is that you can get pretty close to what you want with just a building permit.
Right.
You will have to contend with, potentially with hillside development standards and so on, but you're only, I think, about 160 square feet less than what you're thinking.
Well, but we've come this far, and we've invested this money, so we would at least like to see if we can get this approved.
But these lines are just general lines on this, right? At the 8%, this is at the total, doesn't show from one end to the other,
Well,
the true?
So what would be wonderful to see and to consider would be the full 2 acre survey with all the slopes.
Okay.
But I'm saying based on this one, it's just my personal judgment. I'm not a surveyor, but I know when I'm going uphill and when ground gets steeper, and I
Well-
know your house is higher than that other, you know, the other.
But as it stands right now, the criteria from the survey does fit into the city code, is that correct?
No, it does not.
Our engineer believes it does, that's why we moved forward with that.
Well,
And he had
yeah.
discussion, we believe, with staff on that. Is that not correct, or?
I wouldn't say that, no,
No.
this is what we said. Depending on the slope,
Mhm.
it could be or could not be allowable. I know that your engineer is of the opinion that it is within that.
Mhm.
If you read the code exactly, an area of not less than 1 acre shall be provided and maintained for each dwelling and uses thereon. Acreage will be determined by slope contour as follows: 0 to 8% slope, minimum 1 acre lot. 8 to 30% slope, minimum 2 acre lot. And 30% slope and greater, minimum 5 acre lot. So, and that's, proof of slope by applicant will be required before a building permit shall be issued. That's the entire paragraph.
Mhm.
So, in other words, you have to have 8% or less in order to go down to a 1 acre lot in this
Okay.
zone. So, the document that we looked at that he provided, it just shows some slopes across maybe, little 30-foot sections. It doesn't have a slope from the top of the lot to the bottom, which would give you an average. It just shows, here is 8.76, here's 9.53, here's 8.74, here's 7.48, here's 8.88. I'm guessing you averaged those numbers?
I did.
So,
Thank you.
so we don't have something that says that the slope is 8% or less in front of us?
Right.
And that's what Larry's saying.
Okay. So if we average these slopes, it would be.
Well, I think, no, and then what Larry's saying is it also doesn't show anything of the other half of the lot.
Well, this gentleman, I'm not sure who this gentleman is, I appreciate your input, just gave me this and says our slope is at 7.3.
The average.
The average.
But so what you're saying is that if we subdivided the lot that our house is on would not be compliant?
Exactly.
Well, that's your suspicion, right? Depending on you're saying it's steeper up there.
Yes, I'm contending that it's steeper up there, and without proof or a survey to determine the slope.
Both new lots would have to have an average slope of 8 or less.
The 2-acre lot would have to have a slope of, yeah.
Yeah, but what you're saying now is both new lots, to be 1-acre lots, would have to have an average slope of 8 or less, right?
Well, I'm saying before we would subdivide.
Right.
Both lots, have to
Yeah.
be 8 or less.
Okay. So then we would have to pay for another.
Yeah, the low one could be less, but if the higher one's more, we still are challenged.
Dan, can I interrupt you? This gentleman just showed me this, I mean, from here to there is that, and that's what he comes up with.
Oh, you're just looking at the elevation? Yeah. We don't have the elevation at the top of the lot, at the top. No, the top of the entire lot. You're just looking at one of the new proposed half lots. Tim is a surveyor, he's an engineer. He's here for a different item.
Hi.
So,
Please state your name and,
Tim Watson with Watson Engineering.
thank you.
I don't represent them, but slopes are something that we run into all the time that are, a struggle with certain jurisdictions. So the definition, the way it was described tonight, it does not state whether the slope is measured along the longest part of the property or at a diagonal. But if we take the general slope of this property from opposite corners, which is the general slope of the land, you have a vertical difference of almost 23 feet. And that length is 316 feet-ish, somewhere in there. You average that out and you get 7.3% slope. So according to this topography that was generated, it is less than the 8%.
And my point, what I was just saying to you, that is only on the one half of the
Correct.
divided
We
lot.
don't know what the other lot is.
Precisely.
That's something that is easily determined with just a little bit of surveying. So you can talk to Steve about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the reason why I'm kind of challenging you on whether it is steep or not, because looking at it on Google Earth, and I know Google Earth is not a survey, it appears to be pretty average. The slope seems to be pretty consistent based on Google Earth, and I could show an elevation profile. So, again, we're right on the ragged edge of this 8%. That's why it matters, right?
Yeah, I mean, it matters because, whether it's in violation of code or not hinges on the slope. But we would also point out that it was made a 2-acre lot for a reason in the beginning.
20 years ago.
And, well, the slope probably didn't change in the last 20 years, much anyway.
But has the code changed in 20 years?
Don't know.
Hard to say. That was before my time.
Hard to say if the ground's changed in 20 years too.
Okay.
The road probably hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So we might have that slope from our original build then, right? Our contractor may have had that. I don't know.
Potentially.
Hey, Tim, come do your math.
I wasn't able,
Just on Google Earth, on a diagonal.
I wasn't able to find those records.
Are there any other concerns that while they're doing the math to help you
See,
answer?
let me look through this.
We start at 59. 465.
Well, the other concern from my perspective, the other commissioners may feel different about things, is setting a precedent. So we're in a subdivision, we start pulling lots out and re-subdividing them and making the lots smaller and smaller. Potentially with EADU code, we can double the density of that subdivision. Every house, every lot in there could now have an ADU without doing a subdivision. Now, if we start allowing subdivisions, each one of those homes can also have an EADU. And so you can see where we end up farther down the road.
Well, and if you look at our subdivision, most of the people that have the 2-acre lots have a giant garage on their property also. We do
Right.
not. We have a very
That's-
small footprint
There's-
on our property.
Well, and that's not an issue really, having a
No, it's
garage.
not, but I'm just
It's,
saying.
you know, you can build other things on that property, you just have to comply with hillside development standards,
Right,
is all.
right. And since there are other 1-acre lots, there's 11 one-ish acre lots, and there's 11 2 or more acre lots.
Right, and as I was explaining earlier, there's a reason for that. The lower ground has less slope,
Yeah,
and you're allowed 1-acre lots. The higher ground is pretty consistent with 2-acre lots.
right.
For what it's worth, on Google Earth, I drew an elevation profile, and I did not select the exact corner of the lot as an estimate on either corner. Tim came up and helped do the math. You can see the elevation profile. Larry, it appears that the upper lot is slightly more, steep, as you were suggesting, and the math bears that out. The problem is the rough math comes to about exactly 8%. Now, that's rough math based on not a survey.
Right, and,
Since he did the math before and it was at 7.3 and now the math is at 8, tells you that what we added was a little steeper. So it's right there on the threshold. I don't know how you wanna go forward. That's just what some rough, I would call napkin math with some pretty good stuff gave us.
Thank you,
I'm gonna switch back.
thank you.
yeah.
Oops.
Any other questions that we can
We've-
answer?
That's me switching.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Well, I mean, the other commissioners, I mean, chime in here and what are we thinking?
Well, my first thought is that we probably need an exact number, just because, I mean, code is code and we can't bend the rules. If we could bend the rules, we would have approved an alpaca a year ago.
Yeah, right, yeah, or 2, or whatever that was. Weston?
Well, I think you're undermining the original intent of the subdivision, and you're opening up precedents, so I think it's valid concerns.
Jamie? Troy is out on this one. so-
Yeah, I agree with Weston on that. I just don't wanna open a case where
Yeah.
everybody can go ahead and split their lots and then you're getting half-acre lots now or
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. I would be completely fine with acre lots, but once again, you have to be fair to everybody around. I think you can accomplish what you wanna do with the new ADU, regulations that we just wrote.
Because for the EADU, then it doesn't come to the planning commission. We wouldn't have to purchase water rights. Right.
You might,
If it's entirely within the new ADU code, it's an administrative approval.
Okay.
If it doesn't, then it would just be denied. Neither would come to the planning commission.
right. Right, exactly, as Dan said, it's an administrative decision. It can be made in the office, but because they have code and they just apply the rules administratively,
Mhm.
and, there you go.
And keep in mind, tonight, the planning commission, if you wanna push forward, either they will table it, 'cause they don't have enough information to make a recommendation,
Mhm.
or they will give a positive or negative recommendation. It then goes to city council.
Gotcha.
So, sometimes we have positive recommendations that go to city council, and who knows what the city council will do, 'cause it's a legislative decision. And that can be either coming from a positive or negative. Generally, they're gonna look to this body to see what they, 'cause they're the advisors, right?
Mhm.
So, anyways, that's one of 3 outputs. You could withdraw and try and do an ADU. You could say, we would like a determination and get either a positive or negative, assuming they can clear up this slope thing, or feel good voting on it. So, that's where we're at.
So if we went back and had our, surveyor do the whole lot and it comes to, under the 8%, then there's not an issue then?
Or would you
Yes,
still,
there's-
would you still have problems?
I still have issues,
Would,
and it I
would it be
would still have an issue.
would
It's
it,
the precedence that would be set.
Okay.
So
sorry,
would
Larry.
we be within code then? But we'd be within the code of the way it's written.
Would
No.
it be permissible, since
Well-
it's a subdivision, to take a vote off the current property owners and let them decide as a subdivision?
I think that's what they did with writing the letter out. I mean, that is technically kind of your vote, to let you know
We
what
sent
they
15
feel.
Work out to
letters
be.
out,
Yeah,
Was in
and
favor,
we had
wasn't
only one negative.
but then if those
Well,
subdi-
hold on, let's do this one at a time. Sorry, Jamie?
okay, no, I was just saying, then if they sell it, then those current new ones still would have the option to subdivide if we let one person.
And also, if I could inject there, the role of the planning commission in something like this is to give a recommendation on, not necessarily, does it fit code, does it fit even, feel and character of subdivision and that. As far as taking, public clamor into, and by public clamor, I mean opinions. The city council could do that if they wanted to.
Yeah.
It wouldn't really be appropriate for the planning commission to have a vote of the citizens, 'cause we're looking at it from a technical recommendation standpoint.
Right, we're applying rules that are already in place.
Right.
We're not gonna make a discretionary.
So more than likely,
Decision.
you would have to table it until we could get that officially.
Well, I suspect that there's yet another option. We can make a negative recommendation
Mhm.
based on the slope, if you want a recommendation from us tonight.
Well, we
But
prefer a
then-
positive one.
And then, and we could make it contingent upon,
Yeah.
but you could go and get the slopes calculated by your engineer, surveyor, and bring that to the city council and say, look, we've got this, it's documented, and although we had a negative recommendation, it was based upon the slope being out of, tolerance, if you will, and we've had it surveyed, and it turns out it's intolerance. So there's that way of doing it too, so.
Okay.
You agree, Dan?
Yep. And I just wanted to point out, this lot has, and I think Larry already did, but I noticed a couple of comments. I wanna make sure there was a good understanding. There are a mixture of 1 acre lots and 2 acre lots in this subdivision. Pretty much all of the lots from a certain point up are 2 acre lots, and that's what Larry talked about. If this was split, it would be contiguous with other 1 acre lots from there downhill, directly north on the street. But yeah, I agree with what you said.
Are the 2 acre lots all over 8% though?
I believe, and of course now we're guessing, but it seems like, where the subdivision gets a little steeper is where they get into the 2 acre lots. In fact, the very most corner lot is a 4 acre lot.
Yes.
I can pull it up on the screen if people wanna see the layout.
Actually, I think that's a reasonable thing to do at this point.
Sorry, Cal, I'm switching back.
So, while you guys are doing this, I would hate for you guys to waste your time and figure out all the slopes.
Thank you.
From other comments made up here, I think there's other issues besides slope.
Right,
My opinion is if you came back with the slope saying yes, it qualifies, I would still have an issue because I wouldn't want 1 acre lots being subdivided to half acre.
right.
So I would hate for you guys to waste your time on that because I feel like other council members kind of feel the same way.
Do you think that this isn't really comparable since we're still keeping within the 1 acre lot, minimum? We're not asking to have a half acre?
No, I love your guys' idea. I'm just saying, if we give precedence to you guys, if somebody down the bottom of the hill that has a 1 acre lot comes to us and says, hey, I wanna subdivide it to a half acre lot, you know, so-and-so up the street did it, you kinda have to let them do it as well. So now we're stuck with half acre lots, 1 acre lots, 2 acre lots in a subdivision that was created for 1 and 2 acre lots.
Is there an ordinance for them to take an acre lot to 2 and?
In this subdivision, you actually probably couldn't, 'cause it's rural estates,
Okay,
but you could across town, different places.
okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of a,
But that would.
it is a precedent, just not in this subdivision to go to half
Not in
acre
our
lots.
subdivision,
So then that's unlikely to happen then.
correct.
So this
Well,
was, these are the
or-
lots I was talking about.
It's unlikely that you could take a 1 acre and divide it into halves, because the minimum lot size is 1 acre
Okay,
in rural estates.
in rural estate, so that's as low as we could go.
Except, based on slope, the
Mhm.
minimum size then becomes 2 acres and
Okay.
so on and so on.
Then never mind, I take that back.
So this is the 4 acre lot here in this corner.
But I would say all the other 2 acre lots could request to be split
Yes.
to 1.
And then neither of them are exactly 1 or 2 or whatever, but
Right.
Right.
most of these that are downhill are 1 acre, and then you get up into these 2 acre lots. So this is the lot under discussions.
Hey, Dan, is that area south of, this, subdivision, is that part of the subdivision? You're not, when you get up in.
No,
That's a black property.
no, this, to the south is straight down, and that's a 40 acre. Oh, yeah, Black's on it,
That's a
yeah.
black
Yeah.
property.
I assume you were talking about this,
No.
Oh, no.
because the Blacks used to own that. My bad. That good?
Any
Want me to-
questions,
want me to-
further comments? So I guess at this point, I would ask you what path forward you'd like to pursue. Would you like to give us to give you
Give us a recommendation?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and give us a recommendation, whether it's positive or negative, that way.
We prefer positive though.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so I just wanna say something again now really fast. So, we did have an engineer here, even though he wasn't representing them, give us rough numbers. I feel like it's close enough, with that average to make them go back and delay this, that we could give a positive recommendation with those numbers. That's just my opinion, it's close enough.
Thank you, Jamie.
Well, I'd entertain a motion in either direction.
Oh, I'm in the wrong thing. Well, I was gonna give a negative recommendation.
No rush. Well, you can do it either way, and we can vote it down, and, either way, it's a vote.
Okay, I give, a negative recommendation to city council on the Valley Heights minor lot subdivision, parcel number previously stated, but the address is 1118 west, 575 south, due to, not complying with, Parowan Code 15.44.030 pertaining to slope.
And that was that was a motion, right? You didn't.
Oh, I'm
start with-
sorry, I didn't start with I make a motion, I'm sorry, I started with,
We lost Callie.
yep.
So did we capture that?
Video AI did.
Okay, do I have a second? If I don't get a second, that motion fails and be off the table.
All right, I make a motion to give a positive recommendation to city council on the lot split of, do I need to give the parcel number or just the address?
Either one, I can give you the parcel number if you'd like.
Parcel number A-2055-0011-00.
0. Do I have a second?
Sorry, Weston, it falls to you on whether or
Well-
not you second.
About this slope thing again, are we assuming off what we know right now, or is it actually getting checked, or what?
Well, they can go forward to city council no matter what we do here with
Council can
proof.
decide?
And the council ultimately decides this. This is only a recommendation to council.
Okay, I second the motion.
Okay, so we have a positive recommendation on the table for this application for splitting this 2-acre lot to 2 1-acre lots. And a second. Is there any further discussion?
Is it okay that we have an even number?
Hmm?
We have an even number voting, is that
Well-
okay? Okay.
We'll see. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm opposed?
I'm opposed.
There we go.
Did Troy put in his vote?
He reclused himself.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. That's why it was like, sorry, Weston, it's really relying on you because Troy's out.
Well, that was an easy motion.
Yeah, so the question is, what do we do on a tie?
Well, does it just go to city council
Goes
with,
to city council without a recommendation.
with a recommendation, but with a tie, a split vote?
So it failed, so you voted against it, Larry?
I did too.
So we do not have a successful motion.
There's no, okay.
Was it a tie?
It's a tie.
So it wouldn't even
So it
move
fails?
forward.
So we have a tie, we have even numbers, and it's a tie, and it's for a recommendation. We could make another motion,
Yeah.
or we could send it forward as a split decision to the council, 'cause it's not binding anyways, it's a recommendation.
Right.
What do you think? I see this,
I think that you send it forward as a split vote,
decision.
recommendation, the council's here. You have 3 of the 5 actually sitting and watching, and they can make their assessment at that time. So it's a split recommendation. I don't believe it has to be yes, we recommend it, or no, we recommend it, but even if you've recommended it to no, then it still goes to the council.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's not like it has to have
No.
an outcome.
Yeah, I-
No.
Wouldn't that be the same as just no recommendation?
Or split, or no recommendation, or,
I think a split recommendation is probably different than a no recommendation.
Yeah,
It is-
split is different.
Either way, it's productive
Split vote.
because we've identified the issues.
Excuse me, just a second.
You the water girl now? Thank
Motion is
you.
for approval, even though it didn't get approved, or didn't get denied, but it didn't get approved, so that means it's been approved.
No, it doesn't quite work that way.
Well, it could be reported to the council as a split motion.
Yeah, that's what we
Yeah.
just
Okay,
Yeah.
I
discussed.
didn't hear that because I was
Okay.
being team manager.
Weston, you have, excuse me, order please. Thank you. Weston, you
What?
have the floor.
Oh, I was just saying that this meeting has still been productive because, we've identified the issues that it may have, you know, even though it's a split decision,
Right, or may not have.
so. That's all.
Okay. My recommendation to the applicants is, before that goes to city council, see if you can get that survey and that slope determined, and if you've got the correct slope, then you have a good solid case.
Oh, and I wanted to ask you, is there any CCNRs saying that you can't split lots? No? Okay, thanks.
All right, our next item on the agenda, moving right along, is the Juniper Hills Phase 2 subdivision. Again, I am not gonna vote on this issue, but I am going to help work through the discussion.
Yep, thanks for reminding me.
So Callie,
Whoa, hi, sorry, my head was down.
No,
That
that's
took
okay,
me by
that's right in my face.
Mr. Watson, welcome back.
How are you tonight?
Very good,
Chair?
thank you.
Chairman, Commission, staff, sorry, that's very, very loud. My name's Tim Watson with Watson Engineering. I'm here to represent, the owners for the Juniper Hill subdivision. We are in a unique situation. We are proposing a second phase in a, townhouse project that is currently there, over on Old Highway 91 by the substation, power substation. We, where do we start? Dan and I, Mr. Jessen, excuse me, we talked about this, at length the other day. The current ordinance, for this subdivision requires that we have a 20-foot rear setback, and we can make that work.
Excuse me, may I interrupt you?
Of course, yes, sir.
Callie, can you put up the concept plan that they've sent us, so that all the commissioners are able to see
Yep, that would be perfect, thank you. Yes, it is,
Yeah,
yes,
can we
ma'am.
blow it up? Oh, yeah, perfect, thank you. I
Do you have a
shouldn't do that.
pointer? Laser pointer, oh. Not middle one, okay, great, perfect. So on this is phase one of the subdivision in that hatched area. Sorry for those that are, got cranked their head. This is phase two. And according to your current ordinances, we are required to have a 20-foot rear setback. And that is dual. We currently show a 10-foot setback, which would allow parking stalls for the individual units in the driveways. It would provide more parking, less congestion, if you will.
Don't sell yourself short, you have a 13.29 per foot setback.
Okay, all right, sorry.
We're 6 point something short.
Okay.
What's the slope?
Can I get further into the weeds on that?
Is it important?
It might be relevant. Do you need this? Yeah.
So, this lot line right here might be further back than shown, looking at a parcel boundary map online. So, up to this point, it might meet the minimum setback, not a straight line across.
Have you surveyed that,
Yes.
Tim? Because it shows it weird on the parcel depth map.
Well, we know how the GIS works. It's plus or minus 50 feet. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you. That's a great point. No, you start.
Keith, I'm sorry that I didn't grab you on that, but before I came to the meeting, I actually checked the two lots to the south to see what that joint boundary between them is, and it's exactly the same length, so there cannot be an offset in that line. But
Yeah, so we did prepare a, record of survey or identify the property boundary. Anytime we do a subdivision, that's a requirement for the state of Utah. So, 10 plus, 13 plus feet is what we currently show, which also allows parking in front of each one of the units, plus additional parking that we have over on the side. And parking is always the problem that we have with any development, whether it's commercial development, residential development. And so, I visited with Mr. Jessen a couple of weeks ago, and we talked about this, whether we should take this to planning commission or to the Board of Adjustments. Because the Board of Adjustments would allow us, a variance, if you will, on the rear setback. Thank you. They can't hear, okay. I'll just try to talk quieter then. So, with that being said, we felt that it was probably best to bring it to the planning commission to get your direction. So that we know what direction you would like to do, because the Board of Adjustments is currently unavailable or in the process of being revamped. And so we're requesting direction from the planning commission if it would be favorable to continue with the 13 plus feet of a rear setback and have the additional parking, or if we move that, the roughly 7 feet, it would eliminate additional parking in front of each one of those townhomes across there. And so that's kind of our request tonight, is to see if the planning commission has a suggestion that they would like us to proceed. Obviously, we would like to move forward as quickly as we could so that we can get this process finished up. It would take us quite a bit longer if we waited until the adjustment for the appeals process to be revamped and worked through the city at this point.
So, thank you. Can you show us again with the pointer which parking spots you're talking about that
Right.
would shrink or go
So
away?
each one of these units has a driveway with a garage.
Correct.
So the cars will not be parking directly in front, for the existing townhouses. They will have a garage, and they will have access to be able to park in the driveway. So that eliminates it reduces the amount of overflow that would have to be filled in the other portion. Dan, Mr. Justin, did I get that close?
Yeah, so, I mean, we don't have specifically spelled out exactly what parking is required. It's left up to the Planning and Zoning Commission to interpret what we need. We do know that projects like this, all it takes is for a couple of people to have a trailer or two and a couple extra cars. If you have somebody that moves in and they got 6 kids and 3 of them are driving, without those parking spaces in front of the driveways, you count the number of parking stalls, and there's like 2.1 or something like that per new building, townhome. With those parking stalls, can you park 1 or 2 cars in front of those? How do you count that?
I think it's 2. I think it's tandem parking, if I remember correctly. And
So you add 20.
trying to go off of memory,
Here's the concern. What happens in these small areas with lots of cars, we end up with cars out on the road, out on 91. And they can park there legally, but it is a hassle, it's a pain. I'm sure that in the neighborhood around there, you have homes across the street and all that. You get all these cars parked out on the street. Then what car do you park out in the street? Well, what happens when you park your junker? And it ends up becoming this nuisance problem. So extra parking is a good thing. We could probably approve it without the parking spots that are in the driveway, but then later when there's a parking issue, it's public clamor and coming and complaining, neighbors complaining on neighbors to the city, and it's anyways. So that's just the question is a variance is a setback is a pretty hard and fast rule. It's black and white. That's why I told Tim it just doesn't pass. We can't administratively pass that as it sits with the existing setback, realizing that there's a trade-off with parking for that.
Right, so let me just discuss a little bit of where we sit from the planning commission perspective. So this is a concept plan. It's not a plat yet, so this is submitted for basically feedback on, is this concept gonna fly, so that the developers and the owners can make decisions on what they need to do going forward, especially when it comes to plat time. So our recommendation is simply feedback. It's not a recommendation to the council. This wouldn't be... So I'm not sure, Dan, where we end up in appeal space if we give a negative recommendation, or we just provide feedback, that's not really a rejection, and I'm not sure you get into Board of Adjustment space until we look at the preliminary
You need a
plat.
denial to appeal. You need to appeal. There needs to be a denial that gets appealed in order to trigger Board of Adjustments. And what Tim talked about, part of our updating our subdivision code, we were, planning on moving forward with an administrative, with a appeal authority is the way the state code refers to it. The concept of a Board of Adjustments is kind of outdated. All the state code refers to anymore is an appeal authority. So we had talked about doing, moving to an appeal authority that was a single individual who is up to speed on land use problems and issues and code and all of that could handle this. We have had recently a Board of Adjustments. I don't know if we tried to convene that, if we would have a full Board of Adjustments, and I would rather not find members, appoint them in a scramble, and by the time we get them put in and get them trained by our attorney, we've moved on to an appeal authority of one person. So, for all intents and purposes, we don't really have an active appeal authority, an active Board of Adjustments, although we could get there. But we don't have an application and a denial until we have a formal application. Now, they did submit this. It is a sketch plan. It isn't a preliminary plat.
But a sketch plan, I don't see that we're gonna reject it or accept it. We're gonna suggest that it be modified. But anyway, that's not the discussion really for tonight. We'll figure that out as we go forward. I think it's more important to provide feedback to Watson Engineering regarding the plan submitted. And so, Heather, if you've got a question?
I have a couple. So the older units, they do or do not have a garage?
They do not, no
So
ma'am.
the older units, which are 10 units, do not have a garage, and there are 20 spots.
Correct.
So if the new units are going to have garages, 2-car garage, 1-car garage?
At least one, most of what, my client uses is a 2-car garage.
Okay, so
And I don't
let's say
recall,
it's a
sorry.
1-car garage,
I think
plus how many spots did you say? 2 point something?
There's
Per unit?
There's 23 new stalls divided by 10.
So that to me seems like up and beyond on the amount of concrete and parking spaces, that if the hang-up is on a 20-foot setback, lose those front parking spots, lose the
Great.
driveway.
And that's totally fine. That driveway does, that driveway does allow for at least one more vehicle in.
There may be
and
some
the over-
kind of,
Gotta let one person talk at a time.
Sure. Go ahead.
nope, go ahead.
The overflow, those extra locations, if we did take that away, which we moved it 7 feet, all of that additional overflow would fall into the proposed parking that we're adding to the site.
Okay, the other just point of interest, so the notes on the right side of the page. 3.2.31 says there's 20 parking spaces in the garage. That would imply that those are
Perfect,
car
thank you.
garages. Thanks.
Couldn't the length of the buildings be reduced and meet both?
Potentially, that's,
Probably new architecture drawings is not cheap, I'm sure.
This is the product that they would like to sell because they've used it in other locations and they know exactly what their costs are, and they know that the demand is there for this.
Well, but I'm sure most developers would like to wiggle on the setbacks.
You're exactly right.
That's
You're
a
exactly
natural
right.
thing,
Yep.
they have an incentive to do that.
A good case in point, just as a reference, if you've ever been over to, Cedar City, over by the bowling alley, and west of the bowling alley is, bowling alley and Maverick there, just on the west side of Minersville Highway. That's 3,000 north. And if you drive over there, you will see the cluster of vehicles that do not fit inside that townhouse project. And they have adequate parking according to the Cedar City ordinance in there, and you can see that is a huge overflow. And so my clients, the developers have seen that, and they're trying to mitigate that to the best of their abilities. They can go with a full 20-foot setback if that's the direction that the planning commission, gives them or wants them to go. Like I said, we're just trying to minimize that. These lots to the south, these two lots are very large lots. We're trying to create an access, or we have an access. One of the properties has an easement, across the subject property to access their home. And so that's, that easement is along the west edge here. This is not a public street. This is a private driveway. And they have an easement that comes up,
Isn't that the easement that's drawn on there? Or is that just the driveway, approximate driveway?
That's the edge of the driveway, if you will.
Okay.
The easement itself is not shown because this is not a record of survey.
And one other thing, and it applies to this setback discussion and crowding discussion. And you asked me about this. I gave you, shooting from the hip, driving in my truck, the wrong answer. You asked about a fence on the back, whether that's required. Typically, when you go between different levels of, density or commercial to residential, there's a fence requirement. I told you that there wasn't because it's R3, all of it is R3.
Okay.
Our code actually says if you have a higher density 4 or above units and it borders lower density use, it's not zone.
Sure.
And some of our stuff is zone, in this it's use. So, but it doesn't have to be masonry, it can be, what is the word that says tight slat? It could be a tight slat fence. Anyways, here's my point. You're gonna have to do a fence anyways.
Okay.
And if there is a tight slat or masonry fence, does crowding the easement from a crowding the neighbor standpoint, is it as big of a deal? Now, are these 2-story, 1-story?
They are 2-story.
And since there is a slight slope, is it a walkout from the second story? Okay.
It's a walkout on the lower level.
On the first level, okay.
Yep.
Just providing a little context for everybody to consider.
So the rear of the units would most likely have some type of a little patio or something back there. And that would be considered a common space or a limited use space.
So I'd like to continue the fence discussion, but it's gonna take us down a different rabbit hole, but I'll try and work through it.
But if I can, Chair, if a fence is required, then a fence is required. That's one of the ordinances that we would have to meet, whether we had 20 feet or we have 13 feet. It doesn't matter. We would need to meet your, ordinances for that. So we're not trying to remove a fence or anything. I just wanna
Okay, well, let me then, I'll move into that, just because so a couple things, just indirectly. One is, the application says that this piece of property is 0.9 acres, and the county records show that it's 1.35 acres. How do we reconcile that?
I don't think you need to. That has nothing to do with our direction that we're trying to find, and I could probably show you 9 out of 10 county records that are incorrect. They're using a GIS method that is not as accurate as surveying.
So help me here on this.
Excuse me, Chair, if I can finish talking, I'll be polite to you as well.
Yes, go ahead.
I just wanna make sure that we're aware of that with the record of survey that we have completed, we are showing the correct acreage for the property that we're trying to subdivide. So what I'm asking is if there's a subdivision involved here that hasn't happened yet. No, sir. The only subdivision that would have taken place was 20-plus years ago with the original units on the property. Okay, I'm looking at this plat, and I'm looking at a building on the right-hand I'm looking at this hashed building, and the note there says proposed future property line. Can you talk to that? Sure. So this is all one piece of property. That's, okay, yeah. Yep. Exactly. And as this owner chooses to subdivide his property, that will be the phase boundary, and he'll subdivide this, and this will be the remaining or original parcel. Okay. That will stay in place.
Thank you.
You bet.
So, to that point, I hate to go out into this, but that particular, building located there has a commercial business license. Commercial property also requires that it be fenced from residential property. And so as we talk about fences, we're talking about a fence that comes back from your, what I would call the south proposed property line there,
Is it this
all the
line?
way to the north. Yes.
Okay.
To wherever it needs to come to not get into the street, sort of a thing. And then, of course, we already mentioned across the back of the property line. And then because there is also a lower density residence to the west, there would need to be fence along the west.
So
with that said, before we really dig into that, Callie, will you bring up that PowerPoint slide? So I've taken the liberty of taking this map and putting it into a PowerPoint and drawing the lines that would likely be required to be fenced. So the red line represents places that code supports there's gonna need to be a fence. The dotted lines were questions in my mind that I haven't sorted out yet or been able to answer. So the one on the west side of that property, which over here is my west, but
Sure.
sometimes I get that wrong. So, to me, that borders the already built and in place phase one. And unless we modify phase one, it's grandfathered in and there's no fence there. So I'm not sure that we can go down that road. The other blue dashed line is, it's questionable which project does that, but when that commercial business splits off, because that commercial business, because their south-ish boundary borders residential, they're gonna need a fence there.
So, and that makes sense. I wasn't part of the granting of the business license, so I don't know what the city's stance is on that,
Right.
or if they would, continue that through. That makes sense.
Yeah. So, at any rate, so we don't have to get too much, we don't have to get any deeper into that. So, one idea that if we were to allow, or say, stick with a 13-foot setback in lieu of a 20-foot setback, then I would propose that this fence, and some of that I think is supported in code, not necessarily the entire length, but we would request that the entire length be the 7-foot fence.
7 foot or 6 foot?
7-foot masonry fence. Now, that might be different, I'd have to check code again on the blue dashed lines, but
Sure.
that's the code, and you can look at that in code 15.08170 if we wanna go there, and 14.06.090 if we wanna go there.
If I can ask, Chair, is it standard, practice for Parowan City to require fencing along driveways?
I'm viewing it as a property line, not necessarily a driveway, so.
Well, then that means that, if that's the case, then any type of development along a dedicated street would be considered a property line as well. So I think it's very important that we clarify what the definitions are, and when they do apply, if it's a property line adjoining a residential, that makes sense. If it's driveways or other frontages for access, maybe that's something that we need to make sure that is clarified for that, because that's not something that I've noticed as a standard practice inside the city limits.
Okay, we can certainly dig into that.
Sure.
I was gonna ask about the easement with the fence line that you have driven. I mean, I know it's just a red line, but with that easement, can a fence go there?
You'd need a gate.
Oh, okay, gate, duh, a
What's
gate, okay.
Oh.
Gotcha, sorry.
So, okay, that said, we'll look deeper into fences and whether they go there and they go along roadways or not roadways, but thank you.
Where the 7-foot fence came from, is that?
That's in code?
It's
I know
between
where.
a commercial,
I didn't ask, I asked where.
it's between commercial or industrial and residential. So that would only apply to that site, but
Well,
that's not zoned commercial.
No.
And I don't know if there's a commercial business license there.
there is. Keith and I verified
Along the
that.
back, it is.
So I think he's referring to this portion
Yeah,
here.
that I get,
So
but
if this has a commercial, so is the,
What I am suggesting, I'm sorry, I interrupted
Go ahead.
you.
Go ahead.
I'll clarify what I'm suggesting. So, in a different piece of our code, 14.06.090, titled exceptions, I'm gonna paraphrase, welcome to go read it, because it gets into a little.
I just asked a simple question, I didn't need a whole.
Oh my
wondered
gosh,
where the
Mr. Burns.
7-foot fence came from, and
So the 7-foot fence between the business, the business property,
that's all I wanted to know.
the 7 foot along the back
Yep.
is a discretionary decision could be a discretionary decision by the planning commission.
Right.
That's enabled by that piece of code I just cited.
Okay.
And it would be a minimum of a 6-foot fence. But I'm saying, well, if we're gonna give up, we're gonna have 2-story buildings. We've got a house in the back. An extra foot of fence doesn't seem unreasonable. It's a recommendation.
if I can, 7 feet for a masonry unit does not add up. We need increments of 8 inches. So if that's the recommendation of the commission, could we do 6'8"? If not, we'd have to go 7'4" to make that work.
Code might actually say 7'4", but I just rounded it.
Okay, that makes sense then.
Yeah.
Okay,
Or 6'8" with a 2-inch cap. Those flat guys, no?
that's still 6'10".
Oh, jeez, look at me
Sorry.
and my math.
Sorry.
I'm doing great tonight.
Not trying to get into the
I
nitty gritty.
mean, that's pretty close, but, we're not trying to really.
So if I can ask, Chair, with that 7-foot fence, is it based upon commercial use or commercial zone?
It says commercial development is what it says.
Okay. Okay,
Vagueness, I hate it.
that's tough, it is tough, so.
Well, and just for the benefit of the planning members, Callie, will you bring up that piece of city code, 14.06.090? Yes.
And so, if I can ask, Chair, the purpose of this is for the modification of the fencing requirements, is that what this is?
Well,
This
it
is brought
also
up
would
before?
allow the modification of the, easement
Okay,
So what
you
I'm-
mean the setback?
setback.
Thank you,
Yes.
okay. We can't modify somebody else's easement.
Yeah, I understand, thank you. So, this would enable us to make a discretionary decision regarding the setback, and it also allows us to make a discretionary recommendation regarding the fencing. And so, but also on the fencing, part of it's just flat out required, so what we're really talking about is how tall it's gonna be.
Sure.
May waive, modify, or adjust the requirements of the ordinance. That's what we're talking about, whether we're waiving, modifying. would include those in your recommendation to the city council.
Well, this won't go to city council. I mean, ultimately, the preliminary plat would, and we would have to explain that. But right now, tonight, these are recommendations to the developer. The developer chooses to incorporate those. Great. If he doesn't, then it's tough to have a path forward without, more negotiations of some sort.
And then now we're back to Dan's question of whether we convene the Board of Adjustments or the appeal authority.
That would be correct.
So,
Right.
That would be correct.
So,
depending on whether you could make a choice, say, just deny me, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Then,
then we'll put a lot more work on Mr. Jessen.
yeah, it might be a lot quicker.
Okay, sure.
so with regards to density, this is fine. It's a maximum 24 units an acre, and this is nowhere close to that. Eventually, at the point that the preliminary plat comes in, there'll be noticing requirements,
Mm-hmm.
which you'll wanna check closely with the city, because there are some questions. That's gone. I think we can take that down now. Do we still have the sketch plan up? So, looking at these drawings, Keith, you had,
She asked you.
oh, I'm sorry. No, I think we could take that one down for now and get back to the original one. Well, either one would work. So one of the other concerns is the ingress egress. So it appears, from what I can tell, that the intended ingress egress spot with this sketch is on the west end. We feel that it would be appropriate to have more than one point of ingress egress. And our recommendation would be that that parking lot on the other end of the development be extended to the road.
Is there a reason behind the, additional, usually, in a residential subdivision, usually there's only, a second required access if there's more than 80, that's 80 units. We'll have a total of 20. Is there a justification or reasoning behind that?
Well, not without more research. I mean, that was recommended by the city manager. And we looked at that and we go, yeah, it makes sense. We just tend to, when we're talking about development, we don't like to see a single point of ingress and egress.
And to provide a little more color to that conversation, after we spoke, I remember asking you guys when we had that preliminary, that sketch meeting, why there wasn't two, and you just said there was no reason, which is fine. Our Public Works Director had some questions about, we would wanna see, now I'm gonna try to paraphrase him, make sure that we could get fire apparatus in there, turning radiuses and so forth. Wasn't sure about fire hydrants. There were some comments there. I don't know if he got those back to you or not.
Haven't seen them. At least to me, they may have gone to one of my other staff members.
Okay. And depending on the ease of getting trash truck in there, getting fire trucks in and out and around, maybe it's not needed, maybe it could be needed, but I know he had some questions, and that's what was driving that conversation.
Can you clarify for me, whether the existing units are on city trash or are they community trash, private pickup?
I think I've seen trash cans out there.
I'm positive they're city.
Are they on Old Highway 91 or are they in the actual subdivision?
Old Highway 91.
They pull them out to Old Highway 91, I believe.
Okay, great.
I have a question, but it's a different conversation, so I don't wanna go there until we're done with that.
I think you're comfortable to go there now.
So I can't remember where we left off from a subdividing standpoint. Were you proposing individual ownership of these individual units? If so, we're gonna need to get into the condominium space from a...
It'd be a townhouse.
But I'm saying...
So they are individually owned?
They are individually owned.
Including condominiums, just so we're all on the same page, condominiums are dead airspace between walls. Townhouses are the actual earth beneath the structure. And so it will be, ownership of that, soil beneath the structure, so they will be townhouses.
So from a zoning, from a land use perspective, to approve this, it's going to need, they're gonna have common walls ownership.
Correct.
The only thing we have within our code to have common wall ownership would be in the condominium space in the
Okay.
code. That's why I was saying, you
That's
can call
probably
them townhomes.
technicality, yeah.
I'm saying we're gonna have to make sure that we follow our process to approve a condominium style, from a code perspective, subdivision.
Yeah, most condominiums, I don't know, let me retract that, okay?
You know what I'm saying? And I know that this is getting into just debating what the words mean. I'm saying we can't, in an R3 subdivision, we have to have minimum of 10,000 square foot lots, and you can have an apartment building, but an apartment building is single ownership. So if we're gonna have separate ownership, the only way we can do that is to follow our condominium code.
Okay.
Whether you call them condos, whether you call phase 2 of townhomes, we have to follow our condominium code.
Sounds good.
I just wanted to, I couldn't remember where we left off, whether it was common ownership or single ownership, and I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So long as it doesn't affect the legal rights of the owner of the...
Correct.
And when we were talking about that, and this has been some time since we talked about it, some of the requirements in order to do that is that you have to have a legal entity that's gonna manage the common space and all of that. And I believe that you told me that it would be a shared entity with phase 1, or would you set up a second one for
I
phase
don't
2?
recall. I don't recall if they're gonna be setting up a separate HOA, homeowners association for phase 2, or if it'll blend into phase 1. I don't recall that off the top of my head.
And related to that, was still the plan to do a master meter and have the HOA bill individually, or were you, because there was some, we need to circle back. We got hung up on the setback, and that's why we came, but we had red lines and questions from Public Works, and that's what it came down to, some of these things that I'm now bringing up.
Sure. So if I can, are those items that are necessary for this decision and this discussion?
Nope.
With the
Nope.
council, or the commission at this point? So those are details that hopefully administrative...
We can get to the bottom of those, and we can come up with, change it this way and we're good, change it that way and it fits.
Sure.
The one thing that we couldn't come to an agreement on without really going here was the setback.
So, can you tell me again or explain, so on the west end, what is we've got this dotted line, you mentioned that that's an easement for somebody else?
Or, if I can clarify, is this what you're referring to here?
Yes.
Yes. This dashed line is the existing driveway, so physical surface that the property owner to the south is using for their access to their home. The actual easement is along this boundary here. So from here to the property line to the west. So what they could use is a lot wider than what they're currently using for the single-family access. So their easement for the single-family home comes all the way to the south property line, even though their driveway currently cuts that corner and this small triangular piece is not in the easement. With this development, we would extend it all the way to our south property line, so they would have, still the same access to their property.
So it's your property, their easement?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and you're gonna pay it?
It would be part of our requirement, yes, is to pave it, to at least our south property line and work with them on trying to connect the two together.
Okay, and so you'll have some kind of a written agreement
Written agreement for, sorry, for what?
Well, if you're doing it on their property, it's probably a good idea to have a written agreement.
So, just because we show that this asphalt here, it may not necessarily be this development's requirement. They will pave it all the way to their property line, and probably coordinate with or work with the property owner to finish off the remainder of their driveway so they have access.
Oh, okay. So that's to me, that's an administrative detail for Keith or Dan to work through, if any of that's required. Any other questions from the commission?
So basically tonight, we just as a body discussing whether or not we're mandating the 20-foot setback?
Well,
Or what are we needing to accomplish tonight?
we need to provide specific feedback as to exceptions that we're taking to this concept plan and any, basically that.
So Chairman, if I can, if the if the planning commission chooses to, give us a recommendation that, yes, if you follow this 13-foot setback, here are the items that you need to make sure you include, great, awesome. If you say, no, we want you to have the 20-foot setback, then we will follow the current ordinance, if that makes sense.
So my opinion is I'm fine with the 13-foot setback. I'd much rather see parking so you don't have all those cars in the street like that. I feel like you would need to put a fence up, obviously, in the back for some privacy. I don't feel like we need a fence in the parking lot areas, on the west side or the east side, maybe where the commercial lot is, but definitely just in the back. That's my opinion.
So I understand that, and that would be a code violation.
Says may waive, modify, adjust, doesn't it?
Well, we could.
Isn't that what you pulled up?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't understand the purpose of the fence
So
on
that's,
the west side at all, up against the easement and the road. There's already a subdivision there, so I don't feel like the fence would accomplish anything. Or the same as the parking spots up towards the, northeast side. I don't feel like there needs to be a fence there. There's no condos there or anything like that. It's just parking.
okay, okay. Again, that's a violation of code. If we wanna modify it or suspend it or do something, we can, but when you have a business use and it abuts a residential use, a fence is required.
On
Yes.
On the west side?
Oh, I'm sorry, not on the west side. Well, the code for the west side would be, is that the property line there, if it butts up against a residential use of this size, and it goes towards a lower density, then a fence is also required. Now, if the interpretation is, as Tim mentioned, is that, well, normally you wouldn't do that against a road or a parking lot somehow, I'd be good with that, but we need to kind of figure that out and work through that, because if it's not gonna work, there's no point in doing that.
The property to the west of it is R1?
It's, I'm not sure which R it is. It's the big,
They're all R3 surrounding it.
yeah.
It's an R1 usage, but it's R3 zone.
Yeah, so it's, right, it's an R1 usage, so it's R, which is the same as the property to the south.
Correct.
You know, it's a single home in an R3 zone. So,
Does it need to be a masonry?
yes.
Okay, so
There is an exception in code where there can be I don't even remember the word, tight something board.
Slat.
Fence, tight slat fence. For a portion of it. It's not the entire portion, it's just portions of it. And so, conceptually for me, just to be clear, you know, it's my opinion that we're trading off a setback for a fence or a higher fence in a certain regard. So we've got code supporting a fence requirement that's gonna be there regardless of which setback we use. By minimizing the setback, we're saying, yeah, we're gonna make it a foot taller. And it's
Well,
gonna be
and yes, I'm not disagreeing, but the main trade-off is 20 additional parking spots.
well, and that, yeah.
No.
Yeah.
10.
Well, I thought we established there was
He
two
thought
per.
that only one per driveway, right?
That was a good question. So it was clarified that up in the notes that it says that they are two-car garages.
Oh, oh gosh, yeah, I
So we
can't
would
read
lose-
that.
Neither can I.
Oh, thank you.
in a legible font.
On the west side, closer to Old 91, how far apart would that corral fence be from a block fence if you were required to build block fence? I think it would be a narrow area, like 3 feet or something.
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for you tonight. I don't remember exactly where that corral fence sits, if it's on property line or just inside the property line, one way or the other.
I understand it's barely within the property line and
To the west,
yeah,
so it's barely on their property.
yeah, but
Yeah.
like 2 feet or 3 feet.
Sure. So that would
And
create,
there's also a barn there that would create a wall. According to code, could that, be taken into consideration?
Yeah, I suppose we could consider it, but there's no place in code that says a structure with the wrong setback can serve as a fence. Yeah, is how that would be. I would recommend before we get too much farther, Callie, can you slide that down and expand it so those notes on the right-hand side are in a font that we can read? And I would just ask all of you to take a minute and just read through those so that, it's not a, wow, I didn't see that.
Thank you, at least I shouldn't speak for everybody. So the 43 parking spaces that are provided are the garages themselves, and then the individual stalls, that nothing to do with the driveways.
correct. 'Cause driveways usually are not considered parking stalls. If they're deep enough, they can be that's the only place that you can tandem park. If it's considered a parking stall, they have to be parallel. So you would be able to get a few more parking stalls in there in the driveway that are not included in the calculations shown in the notes.
How many bedrooms per unit in the existing?
I don't know that, I'm sorry. They're fairly small. My guess is they might be 2. If they're 3,
Jamie,
because they don't
do you
have a
know?
garage, that makes sense.
By any chance? No. I didn't know if you... I don't know, I think there's plenty of parking, without the driveways, that the 19-foot setback, 20-foot setback, I am doing great with numbers tonight. 20-foot setback, that would follow code would be appropriate.
I just feel like how many people use their garages for cars too versus storage?
Storage, cheap storage.
There's storage units
So
all over this
You
place
can't
in our
go
town.
wrong with more parking.
They cost money per month.
They
That's
do.
the unfortunate.
Have less stuff, there's
Yeah.
the other option.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are we through reading that? Did everybody go through those notes?
My personal opinion is, I don't really think it's fair to the south property owners, south of this.
The new phase
Lot
2?
line. Yeah, the south property line of the project, to crowd that setback and then put a string of 2-story homes in there, I don't think's very nice.
Well, part of that is the taller fence as a mitigation to
That'd
that.
take Trump's wall to cover 2 stories.
Yeah, but in that case,
Well-
I mean,
conceptual.
They're still going in and they're still gonna be two-story, whether it's 6 feet or not, you're still gonna
Right, but-
see it. The houses are set back and there is that driveway easement.
But
I mean, the
another
house is
seven,
pretty far back.
another 7 feet would be very welcome there by the neighbors, I'm sure. Is-
Neighbors and
certainly would-
homeowners.
Certainly would be if I was the neighbor. 7 feet would be a big deal.
The easement that travels east and west, I thought you indicated you all own the easement. Isn't that the Blackham?
They own it. They own this easement. To their-
Isn't the easement to the
to
the
them.
Bates family on the Blackham's property?
And here.
Yes, it covers both properties, so you are correct that the Bates in this location here, they have an easement across this property as well as this property. And did you say this is the Blackhams? The Blackhams have an easement just across the subject property. So this is a common easement for
Yeah.
both properties, where the Bates have one additional easement over and across the back Blackhams property.
That's gonna remain a private road, private access.
It doesn't involve our, let me clarify, which portion are you
Well,
talking about, sorry?
Speaking of the west,
The west, yes.
from the street to the back, that's gonna remain a private road, that's not gonna be
Not a private road, it's considered a driveway.
Okay,
But we do still meet the fire code access, which is a minimum of 24 feet. So they do have plenty of access there for that.
and so, in this concept plan, or this sketch plan, what we don't see here, and I get it, there's no utilities shown to speak of, no fire hydrants.
There are,
Yeah, are there?
the detail is difficult. We do have water coming in and providing individual units, the access, and then we also have sewer that's shown in here. They're not identified or called out because, once again, this is just a concept plan. With the construction drawings and, possibly the preliminary plat, I haven't looked at those requirements for a while. Those utilities will be shown accordingly.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Well, at this point, I would entertain a motion. I'm sure all of you are thinking about what that's gonna be. I'm not gonna make the motion. I have one here that we can work through. Somebody can adopt it. Jamie, you can read it if you want, or Heather, and modify it if you want. But before we do that, I just wanna walk through what we think the modifications or changes might be. So I'm gonna tell you what I think we have, and then we can discuss those before we get too deep into the motion. So, I think number one is, it's gonna be condominium code. I think Dan brought that up. Item two is gonna be a 7 foot 4 inch fence. Number three is, my view of this, 13-foot rear setback. And item four is, the parking driveway to the east end, it be extended to the street for ingress, egress. What have I missed?
I don't know.
Okay, I'm just running through my notes again to just see if,
It's just, why I say that is just because with it on the agenda just as, you know, subdivision, I don't know what all that means that we're supposed to be checking off tonight.
Well, this is just a concept, so you're really looking at it to see, in my opinion, if it fits on the property, setbacks, any other concerns that pop up, again, like parking is, you know, a usual thing, ingress, egress, in this case fencing. Anything else you might have questions about? I'm of the opinion that because this is a sketch plan, that the engineering is gonna be covered in more detail on the plat, which that will be reviewed by the engineering department and public works and the city engineer, and so we're fairly well covered on that. So, you know, I'll wait for a minute.
Chairman, can I ask one item for clarification? You mentioned that the condo code would be followed, if I understand correctly, the condo code would be followed whether this is a 13-foot setback or a 20-foot setback. Is that correct? Okay, we're not modifying any other part of that.
That's just a standard, yeah.
Yeah, sure, okay, all right, thank you.
My only question would be the fence and where is it going? If we need it on the west side at all.
And could I suggest that since we are really, we're at a sketch submittal, we don't have to make a determination on all of the things right now, especially if, you know, we could give a recommendation on something like that. I mean, by all means, make the motion you wanna make. I'm just saying, I think the real tricky, critical part is gonna be this setback versus parking. But that's just my input there.
Right, are you suggesting we would move forward with fencing decisions on the east and west side farther down the line?
Yeah, if there isn't any sort of consensus. If there's kind of a split concept and you wanted to look at it or something like that, but.
Well, I don't know the code well enough to.
Well, it's not as much about the code as it is about, if I understand Larry's point, since there's, well, and maybe it's totally valid because you're talking about a give and take on the setback. If your intention is to say, I'm comfortable with a setback, but I'm concerned about the impact on the neighbors, therefore maybe the trade-off is a higher fence or something like that, then I guess it's totally relevant.
Well, that's what I'm talking about along the rear side, or the south side, I should say. So, I'm gonna throw some words out there. Somebody's gonna have to grasp them or take my paper to start a motion. So, in effect, what I have is a motion that ends with resolution of the following items, and we'll list those individually. But, so it really says, based on review of the preliminary sketch plan dated July 2nd, 2024, we recommend the approval of the proposed Juniper Hills Phase 2 subdivision conditioned upon acceptable resolution of the following items. 1, agreement to follow our city condominium code. 2nd, that the fence on we'll say the south side of the property be 7 foot 4 inches along the entire length of the property of the south boundary line. And we'll accept a 13-foot rear setback with, assuming that the parking stays as depicted on this sketch plan. And then the driveway at the east end, driveway parking at the east end be extended to the street. And then I would say fencing on the west side and the east side is TBD, may be required, may not, but so that you can plan on something, go ahead. In the meantime, we'll try and figure out code and what way we need to go, and that sort of a thing. So there is some merit, I think, in extending that fence on the east end, just maybe up to the parking lot, and leaving it as such. There's also the other argument that it should go all the way because of the new parking lot headed out there. But any rate, we'll work through that. And then on the east side, we need to do some research. Certainly, I don't think it would be extended all the way to the street. I think it would be extended along the Phase 2 boundary if we...
Sorry, did you say east or west? I thought I heard east.
I'm talking west,
Okay,
over here.
okay, thank you.
Sorry. So I think from there, if there's any fence requirement, it would likely be from that, southwest corner up into the southeast, the northwest corner of Phase 2.
If it's a 20-foot setback, can the fence be 6 foot, or is it always 7'4"? Like, what's our thing?
So,
Your current ordinance says 6 feet.
right, so
Okay,
that, exactly right. So,
Okay.
the requirement is fence, in the normal requirement would be 6 foot.
okay.
So if we go to 20 foot, we could argue that, code supports a 6 foot fence. A trade-off, if we're gonna do it, it is different, but,
All right, hand me that paper, mister.
So is there any other questions or comments that we need to
Yeah.
clarify?
Well, can we, real quick, because...
I
Yeah.
don't wanna rush this.
Yeah, well, and the thing too is that there's so many different parts to it, and I just don't want us to be here for 30 minutes with motions. So, I mean, obviously, I'm imagining we're all in favor of following I cannot say that word. Condo code. So, really, the 3 other questions is the fence, the setback, and the driveway going out of the east parking lot. Right? Am I correct?
Well, there's 2 fence issues, unless you wanna...
Well,
Yeah.
in my opinion, if it's a 20-foot setback, I'm thinking a 6-foot fence.
Right, for that motion, that's what that would be, but that fence would extend along the entire south boundary of the, Phase 2. But there's the other 2 fences that would be in consideration on the east side that need to be mentioned so we're all on the same page when we lose our memories a little farther down the road.
Okay.
With respect to egress on the east side,
Yes, sir.
per you, it complies with current code. The number of parking spaces you need, or the number of parking spaces that you have, it's sufficient to have 1 egress.
Yes, that's my understanding. Usually when we do a residential subdivision, anytime we hit 80 units, so that's 80 lots, 80 townhouses, whatever that might be, that's when the second access is. This would be considered like a private parking lot. Private parking lots are not required to have 2 access points or anything like that. The one thing that they are required is to make sure that between physical pieces, that they do have at least 24 feet for fire apparatus. And we do have that. And I just noticed, I don't know if this is gonna continue, but down in this corner, we have a dumpster, pad. So most likely it would be private trash for Phase 2, not public trash. And so the only thing that we would have that would really get in here, would be the fire apparatus if needed.
Just so I understand, the request for egress on the west side, it's Dan and Larry's, they would prefer that we have that. Is there any argument regarding master plan, or are there any arguments other than
No,
want it?
there isn't. And I need to go back to all those notes. So I don't wanna say that there's a requirement, there's no requirement from the code that says it has to be there. If we can clear up some of these other questions, and this is what they're presented, then I don't think we could tell them no administratively. Personally, I'd like to see it, but personal opinions doesn't really matter when it comes to approving something administratively, whether it fits code or not. Am I right?
Yes, thank you. Personal preferences usually don't go in line with these type of developments.
And what is the drainage plan on this?
To be determined. Most of the development itself has property coming off-site, so that will continue because that's historical flow. We will need to figure out what we're going to do on-site.
Okay, so drainage is TBD.
Yep, it's one of those utilities that we, will work through.
Other questions? Well, I'd recommend we work through a motion.
All right. I make a motion based on review of the preliminary sketch plan dated July 2nd, 2024. We recommend the approval of the proposed Juniper Hills Phase 2 subdivision conditioned upon acceptable resolution of the following items. Number 1, it follows condo code. Number 2, there'll be a 7-foot 4-inch fence going along the south side of the entire length. There will be a 13-foot rear setback, and the driveway to the street on the east end be extended to the pavement to provide ingress and egress.
Now, if I can clarify, is that parking on the east side, is that personal preference or is that code?
Well, we're gonna say that's planning commission, preference. So if we wanna talk about code modifications and trade-offs, we'll go to that space if that's what we
Can I ask one
have to do.
clarification, because I didn't get in my notes? 10 units?
Yes, sir.
And how many parking spots?
43 total, including the 2-car garage.
10?
But that's for 20 units, right?
Excuse me?
Isn't that the total of the whole space? 43 is just additional on top of the 20 that they, so 63?
More than you've got anywhere else in town.
That's what I was gonna say, there was well, anyway,
That's
there's one in Cedar City that went in with
why there's plenty of
.08
parking.
parking spots per unit, .08, which,
Exactly.
anyway.
It's right close to the university.
All right, can I finish my motion and we can talk about it?
You've got the
Please.
floor.
Thanks. And then parking to remain as depicted, and the west and east side fencing shall be determined according to code.
And did I hear you list the 4 or 5 items that we had?
Yep, I did.
Okay. Callie, can you read that back to us?
Do you want me to repeat it again? Okay.
Do we agree that east and west fence is to be according to code
just
or
said
to
that.
be discussed later? TBD was the term.
I think according to code.
Yeah, that's what I have, according to code.
For our current subdivision code, this will be coming back to you anyway, so I wouldn't get too worried.
Yeah, right, yeah, I mean, the preliminary plan with a lot more details coming back. Maybe. Okay, can you read that motion one more time?
Oh, my gosh.
Yes, of course.
All right, here we go.
All right, I make a motion based on a review of the preliminary sketch plan dated July 2nd, 2024. We recommend the approval of the proposed Juniper Hills Phase 2 subdivision conditioned upon acceptable resolution of the following items. Number 1, it will follow condo code. Number 2, it will have a 7-foot 4-inch fence along the entire length of the south side. There'll be a 13-foot rear setback. The driveway to the street on the east end shall extend to the pavement to provide ingress and egress. The west and east side of the fencing shall be determined according to code, and parking to remain as stated.
Okay, everybody got it? Do I have a second?
I second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your time tonight, I really
Hold-
appreciate it.
Hold on, get there with me for a minute. Any opposed?
Opposed? Nay.
We have 2 nays. The ayes carry the motion. Thank you, Mr. Watson.
Thank you. Can I ask about the nays? Is there
Oh, that's
something
right.
you- oh,
Okay. I'm sorry, I was not gonna vote on that.
Oh. Oh, yeah, that's right.
I rescind
So then
my
it's
vote.
tied. It's tied. The days, in my opinion,
Hold tight. How's this tied?
'cause
You had 2 nays?
yeah,
And 2 ayes. Larry said he wasn't voting, he had a conflict of interest at the very
So
beginning.
I recused myself from voting.
Okay, but you've got 5 members, or does Mr. Burton
He's
not?
a member of the council, he
I
doesn't
don't
vote.
vote.
He's-
Really?
He's a city council. Can I get a nay?
That's the first city council member that I've seen sit on the planning commission that doesn't have a vote.
That's 'cause he's not on the planning commission, he's,
Interesting, okay.
sits.
I didn't understand that
I'm a
before when it was a tie vote.
liaison.
so my only hang-up
Yeah.
is the setback. And the reason for it is that I feel like, a lot of people have such a negative opinion of high density, and I'm very much in favor of it. And so when we quote-unquote bend the rules, I'm afraid people are gonna be more opposed to high density. I also think that there's plenty of parking without having that driveway space, that providing that 20-foot setback would, not only give the space between the other properties, but would also give the homeowners a little bit more space in a quote-unquote backyard pad area, common area that you were referring to.
Sure.
And so that's it.
Okay, thank you.
So my question, Heather, to you is high density. The condos are going in, whether it's a 20-foot setback or a 13-foot setback. So how does that apply to this?
I am totally in favor of high density. The 20-foot setback is the code.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, how is that applying to high density? Because the condos are going in
Oh, I'm
versus not, so the density isn't changing versus the 6-foot.
No, I'm not referring to changing in the density. I'm talking about NIMBY. I'm talking about not in my backyard.
Okay, but then you're not referring to high density because that doesn't have anything to do with a 6-foot setback
I don't
or a
believe there
20-foot
is
setback.
I don't believe there is less than 20-foot setback in high density, is there?
But I'm not saying high density is how many people are going in the area
Right.
being built. So if he has a 20-foot setback,
Which is
are the
code.
condos not changing? No, it's still the same amount of units, it's just taking that 6 foot. It's not changing density at all.
It's 7 feet and it's close.
It's 7 feet, but it's not gonna change the density of how many units are going in.
That doesn't make it,
It
that's
just pushes it
code.
closer to the adjacent property.
Yeah, but that doesn't have anything to do with high density, you guys. That's just, do
Space.
you understand? It doesn't matter, the condos are still going in, whether it's 20 feet
So
or
why
13
should we
feet.
bend the rules just because?
No, I'm not saying you're bending the rules, I'm talking about density here. You said high density, I'm saying the condos are going in, whether it's a 20-foot setback or a
Mhm.
13-foot setback.
I would prefer
The
20-foot
condos are
setback.
all still going in.
I
So
would
how is
prefer
the
a
density changing
What she's saying,
13 versus 20 foot?
she's pointing out that high density,
Can you turn on your mic, Weston?
I think she's trying to make the point that high density is viewed unfavorable by adjacent property owners a lot of the time, and squeezing the existing setbacks makes that even,
Makes them
less
wanna fight it
desirable.
more in the future.
and there's a reason that we have setbacks. Somebody thought that there should be a 20-foot setback there, and they probably weren't even thinking about high density.
But high density doesn't have to do with the setbacks, you guys.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. The condos are going in. Okay, look at it this way.
So
If he has a 20-foot
every-
setback,
Every property has a setback, and most of the standard rear setbacks are 20 feet. It doesn't matter if it's high density, low density. Commercial is usually the only thing that might vary a little bit depending upon its position to the zoning or the use behind it, or to the side. So, that makes sense. Thank you for your feedback, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the units. I think it's great.
Okay.
So,
No, I
Well,
am very much a fan of, high
that's great.
density and all that, so.
all right,
have it.
hang on.
Stronger.
All these opinions of what we're in favor of.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Is great,
Thanks.
thank you. So, the question becomes, what do we call this? Another negative another non-recommendation? No recommendation?
I think
A
we told
tied?
city council with that same thing.
Well, this doesn't go,
No, this
it's not
doesn't
going
go,
anywhere.
yeah,
This is-
no, it's just for him.
This was just
So,
a sketch
just to
meeting
be
for him to draw it up.
Just to be clear, when they go out of here with whatever the takeaway is now from a tie vote, they're gonna decide what to do, whether they can afford a fence and they're happy with the setback and they wanna go to the street and that sort of a thing. And then they're gonna proceed to develop a preliminary plat. That preliminary plat is gonna come back to this body for review, along with a review from, Public Works and probably city engineers. And it's gonna get redlined and so on. And somewhere in that process, we're gonna conduct a public hearing. And then we're gonna come up with a final recommendation on a preliminary plat to move forward.
Dan,
which-
where are we on, what would you say if he recommends to his client, which I would predict, that he simply go the appeal route? Would we is it easier for the city, 'cause we have to have a process in place.
But there needs to be you can't appeal something that hasn't been decided, so there needs to be a denial.
Yeah.
Right.
You can't appeal the code. That's the only thing you can appeal is the code. If you can meet certain requirements, you can appeal the code. It's hard to do that, but it is something that is definitely a trade-off that some appeals process looks at.
So what do we?
You're appealing a decision.
Or a standard. You can, my understanding is you can appeal both. It does not have to be just a decision only. So if I don't agree with one of your engineering standards or part of the code, and I think that there could be something else to consider, that's the, process that I have to go through to.
The whole process.
Yeah, the whole process, yeah, to go through to get a different opinion.
So this is the purpose, this is powers and duties of the Board of Adjustments from our code 15.14.030. To hear and decide appeals where it is alleged that there is an error in any order, requirement, decision, or determination made by the administrative official in the enforcement of this article or any ordinance adopted pursuant thereto. So I think I agree with what you said.
And again, just to reiterate, the reason why we came to you first is.
You're appealing a requirement.
Yes, we're trying to streamline this as quick as we can, to get this moving forward. Thinking that this would probably be the quickest and easiest, but it may not be. So, anyway, that's something we're gonna have to discuss with our clients and see what direction they wanna go.
And just keep in mind, we do need to, you caught us right in the middle of updating our subdivision code, right in the middle of updating our appeal authority, and all of that stuff as we have talked.
So the current process still governs, even if you're in the middle of it.
Right,
Let me finish my sentence, since we're letting people finish.
You paused.
You can say you want to appeal it. We're gonna have to assemble an appeal authority. That may take us some time. I thought that we made pretty good progress here until we got to a split vote, but at least it wasn't a hard no. I don't want to presume, but one of the things that the appeal authority is going to look at is whether this hardship is unique to the lot. And one of the things they cannot give you is something based on an economic-only argument.
Sure.
And I would
Totally
think this is probably an economic-only argument, 'cause you could choose to make the building smaller.
I could also choose to eliminate most of the parking. Because your
Exactly.
parking
So I'm saying,
requirements are,
to go
very
the
poor.
appeal authority route, and you're putting pressure, and we're trying to hurry and scramble and get it put together, I think we're gonna go down that whole road, and it's gonna lead nowhere. I would almost suggest, if it's not terribly difficult, could you create a preliminary plat, A and B? Or present it, bring a preliminary the way you want to, and bring it back, and let's see how the voting goes at that point. what are your thoughts there?
I don't have a
You wanna
problem with
talk
that.
to your client first?
Yeah, I can't answer for them.
Okay.
But one thing I do know is that developing property for people should not be this difficult. This is by far, out of all the jurisdictions I've worked with, this is the hardest to work with.
Okay, and what's the purpose of saying that? Throw a rock?
Well, because there's so much ambiguity and unclear, we're in the process of
We'll give you
modifying
that,
this, in
yeah.
the process of modifying that. It does make things very difficult. And I know that
And
that's,
I'm not gonna apologize for the fact that we're right in the middle of updating something the legislature made us do.
I agree, I don't think you should. I'm just saying that it shouldn't be that difficult to go through a process.
And
if
I will
you have
agree.
zoning. Obviously, we're requesting something different, so I understand that. That makes perfect sense.
And what's making this difficult is this, you happen to find us, and then also your timeline. So it is what it is incredibly frustrating, I get that.
Yes, and I think some of the things like requiring a fence, if that's not a requirement, it is or not, that's currently unclear in my mind. I thought you could waive or modify if he's putting in far more parking spots than, I mean, you have great authority to waive, modify, adjust, be reasonable to accommodate what is the desired outcome of developing property. I think in this process, and this is just my opinion, you can always find a way to deny something. You can always find a technicality. You can always go through the code and point to subsection G13II. But I've always believed the process is to come before citizens on this commission who represent the citizens of Parowan, but then try to come in a kind, congenial way, fashion a resolution, and that can't always occur, but it can occur in a kinder environment, and I take your point. So, and I don't think we have to apologize for being in the middle of something.
No, absolutely not.
But in the same breath, as a property developer, if you see this as a rejection because there are conditions, requirements made of you that aren't in the code or aren't reasonable, or, for example, the commercial property, we got into all of that, and the 7-foot fence because you have a less than 20-foot setback.
Sure.
I don't know the purpose of raising I don't know if it's a penalty flag or...
Well, and we know that there's gonna be some give and take. That's totally part of the process. And so, I wanna make sure that I'm not criticizing the town for going through the modifications. I'm excited that you guys are going through those modifications. That's an important
Sure.
piece. But, if we do go back to what the standard is, and I think that that's where Mr. Jessen and I may disagree, it is not a financial hardship for my client. Yes, they can reduce the size. Yes, they can reduce a ton of parking as well. And that may be what they choose to do. They could potentially make some other modifications to include more units on this property if that's what they chose to do, by eliminating some of that parking.
And that's the overarching, in my estimation, reason of why our code gives the planning commission the ability to modify it, 'cause it says in there, I don't know if you read it while I was out of the room, when it benefits the city to make those modifications, the argument being less parking, it could end up being a problem for the city.
Correct.
More parking is gonna be better for us, therefore it gives us a justification to make modifications. So that's the principle we're working with, in my opinion, of the legal.
Yes, no, and that was the only point I'm making.
Okay. Thank you again. Appreciate your time tonight.
Right.
Thank you. Our next order of business is the Master Transportation Plan revision to include 100 North. So I think if we can bring up the master transportation plan, and Dan, you wanna talk us through that?
Yep.
And Dave, I think you're
Let me,
speed a bit on this.
I'm gonna switch it, Kelly.
You still okay?
Yep, I'm good.
He doesn't sit next to me anymore, so I can't nudge him.
If you tuned into our, city council meeting, there was a discussion, and Councilman Burton is here. It was really, something that he was suggesting, and the city council agreed to send a recommendation to you guys to give you some direction, because they would like to entertain modifying the master transportation plan to show a local road, one of these black and white dotted things, or sorry, black, whatever you call that,
Dash.
dashed black line to go through where 100 North would go through the county fairgrounds area. We actually had a graphic, up in city council, but just imagine a dotted line going here and coming down around. The reason why it's shaped that way is it would follow the property line and not cut right through the baseball fields. As soon as this populates, you'll see the property line between what the city parcels are and the county parcels. So effectively, that 100 North on the master plan would just cut through to there. We have, and really the intent of that is to get back here, is to have more east-west traffic, especially considering a potential development, whether in the city or not in the city. If you have additional points of ingress, egress, it would relieve some of the potential traffic. Now, I want to clarify, the city is not going to go acquiring easements and building roads for any development. But if we start talking about a traffic study and any sort of ingress egress requirements in a development agreement, the question is how many, depending on at what point of phasing, how many homes are in there, and so forth and so on. So that's way past, it's related to this discussion, although it is not the same as this discussion. Councilman Burton said, I don't know why when we got done we didn't have 100 North connecting through as well. We have 200, we have 300, we have 400, we have 600. Why don't we have 100 North going through? So that was basically, did I sum it up, Dave? That's basically the conversation that the city council had.
Yeah.
Wanted to send it to planning commission because it's modifying the general plan, modifying the transportation plan, which is a component of the general plan. It can't be done without a recommendation and a public hearing by this body.
I think maybe one other thing that should be mentioned is that the county's gonna be in the process of doing a fairgrounds master plan, is that what we call it?
Yeah.
And so, having this there would be good so that they can take that into consideration in their planning.
Yeah.
It'll accommodate them and their ingress, egress, facilitate their dispersing of traffic during the fair.
Yeah.
And so in their planning, you just don't want them to construct something or build something that would inhibit that. And because it's gonna benefit them as well.
They have mostly funded, they're gonna build in a large barn, think Diamond Z Arena, some version of something like that. They're gonna build here on the east side of the fairgrounds. But before they do that, they're doing a master plan to consider, it's like 17 items, everything from trails to lighting to drainage to all of the different things. And one of the things they're gonna consider is traffic, ingress, egress through the place, how you get a lot of people in and out when you're doing things like the fair and a rodeo or whatever. So, anyways, that's the conversation.
And we also, you've got your, pickleball courts and that road on the west side of the soccer fields that's, you know, partially improved, and it'd just be connecting and making all those things, you know, connected and, you know, helping to move traffic.
And that's not technically a road, it's what you would call a private drive that the city has. But it would be more, when you get events going, it'd be more ways to get cars in and out.
Cause the county is using that now.
Yeah.
During the fair.
Yep.
You know, they even have a sign that routes the traffic in there for different reasons, so.
I thought I heard a discussion that indicated that if that road was there, potentially it wouldn't be open all the time, that it would be gated.
The idea is that, so the county is not sure how they feel about this, and by not sure, some of the county are strongly opposed to a road going through, and some maybe are warming the cockles of their heart towards the idea. But, one of their thoughts is when they have a large event, like the fair, they need the ability to control ingress and egress from the entire event center. So typically, they will have one point of ingress so that they can take tickets or whatever. At the end of it, they want to open up as many egress as possible to allow traffic to leave. They want to be able to have a gate shut so that they can take the horse people over here and they can take regular traffic here for parking. It's just crowd management. So what they wouldn't want to have is a full-time street that they did not have the ability to shut during an event only. So there would have to be some give and take from the city as to whether we would allow them to temporarily close a road, because it would become a public road, and whether we would allow them to close it.
One consideration may be is that how they fence that, 'cause either way, they'll have to fence that contiguous property line.
Yeah.
So if they fence it some way that restricts that, then that may not be necessary.
Yep.
So it just all depends on their planning.
And we don't always agree with the county. When I say we, I mean the city. But we do have an agreement that with the use of these facilities and the use of their facilities, that we can share parking back and forth. We want to work together so that these things are the best possible outcome for events and for all the surrounding neighbors that have to deal with the impact of the events, right?
And we should know that when you know, a line on that master transportation plan doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a road. It just means that it's planned and it can be taken in consideration in the planning process. But it needs to be there so it can be planned.
So I mean, I look at that and for me, I don't see the harm in putting that road into the master transportation plan, 'cause it doesn't make a hard requirement for that road to go there. It's just a statement that we intend or would like to see that road go there. It would come up for negotiation if we ever tried to push it through. However, if it's not there, there's not much of an argument to support a road if we want or need one. Any other comments, Weston? Heather?
Good job, Dave Burton, I like it.
Jamie?
Thank you.
Troy? Well, I'd entertain a motion in that regard. Remember, this would be a recommendation to the city council.
I make a motion that we give a positive recommendation to city council to, amend the master transportation plan to include, 100 north. Extension, thank you, my brain just clicked on that too, as soon as extension of 100 north.
Through the fairgrounds.
Around the fairgrounds, not through, we can't go through.
Yeah, okay.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we'll need to have a public hearing.
Okay, we can do that.
Right?
Yeah, technically, you're right. Okay, well, scratch that.
I should have said that right before you, it just.
Oh,
So-
oh man, I am
All right,
moving
so we're all in
slow
favor
tonight.
of it, we're not
We'll
gonna...
throw it on the next one for public hearing and a vote.
No, it wasn't, because we have to have a public hearing and then we can have the vote.
Yep.
Yeah, we were just testing.
And we're gonna, Dave,
Sometimes it takes too
assuming this
long.
comes back to city council and city council votes on it, we're gonna have to allocate a little bit of money to update the map. Shouldn't cost much. Just occurred to me too.
Okay. Thank you all. Public hearing. Thanks for catching that, Dan. Okay, our next item, subdivision code draft review. I almost hesitate to start on this, but maybe we can crank through it. So this item has a little bit of urgency to it, 'cause technically we should be finished with this by the end of the year. We're a little bit behind the power curve. I wanna fess up and say I received a draft of this in September or October, and drafted an email to send it to all of you, and I sent it to my wife. And didn't hear anything about it again until we started pulling the string, and I think Dan called Hanson and Associates and said, "Hey, where are we?" And then I went, "Oh, geez." So anyway, but in the meantime, I had the copy of the draft, and I worked through that, and I had completed it. And so that was draft one. Now, just so you'll understand, there's two drafts in front of you. If you look at the top, there's a draft version 1 and a draft 3. So draft version 1 tracks changes from the beginning. So they took our code and went through it, and they crossed stuff out and added stuff, and they tracked all those changes. And so we're gonna work through that, because what I did was went through and reviewed all of their comments and additions and changes, and provided them some verbal feedback where they said, "We're gonna send you a draft 2," which didn't happen. They sent a draft 3. And so they've incorporated some of these, and just, I wanna assure you that there's a bunch of just surface errors here is what I call them, and, oh, we're gonna take a break for a minute. Let's do that. Okay, slight recess, 10 minutes.
Stand up.
I don't know if I dare try.
How's your knee?
It's good, no, I think, they said I can do weight bearing, so.
Okay. I was like, do you want me to help you down the stairs?
I'm just gonna stand
Oh,
here a
you're just
minute.
gonna stand and stretch.
Oh, gosh, you do
I have to
that,
straighten
Jason.
a lot of work.
Oh, I've been doing the same.
It wouldn't be difficult if it just
I might.
Well, yeah, if that came in met code with all the setbacks and all the stuff, we would just look at it and say, yeah, this looks good. Push on.
Yeah.
You know, and they never acknowledge the fact that they're asking for exceptions to code, and they've missed some things. And, you know, the real issue with that adjacent parcel, with the garage on it, it's not been split yet. It's zoned R3. It never should have been given
Business license, 'cause it's not a home.
No,
It's
there's
just
no
a building,
home,
yeah.
it's just a building. And,
Well, 'cause that's the Fun Times people, isn't it? Isn't it that the Fun Times? Oh.
Family Adventure Tours Company name.
Okay. Why did I think that they were also connected with Fun Times?
I don't know who Fun Times is. They
They're
could be.
on that same,
So it's Frank and Misty Smith are the business owners.
Here, hold on one second. Let me see if I know them because, Jennifer or Kirstine, somebody, grooms their dog.
Oh,
So, I may have in my head combined two separate businesses thinking that it was them.
yeah, and they might have, I mean, they might have another business, for all I know.
Yeah. Yeah. You stood up, Troy then stood up.
I had heartburn, can you imagine?
Yeah.
A case of heartburn tonight.
Oh, my God, so do I. Jeez. We have never had a tiger, ever.
Troy.
We get two of them.
Yeah.
You know, it's a lot easier to develop in this town if you don't break the rules.
There you go. I agree.
Missed the golden opportunity to say that, didn't I?
Well, yeah, I mean, it becomes kind of.
Cause we were all thinking it.
Yeah, we're here to take tomatoes and.
Well, and that's the thing, you know, when freaking he's sitting here,
Yeah. Yep.
Is your sweatshirt Loyola?
Florida Gators.
Florida, okay.
I was there this time. Oh my gosh, you guys, next time you see me, I'm gonna just be old and crippled and just falling apart.
What?
Talking about me?
No, I'm talking about me, yeah, I'm gonna have a birthday
When?
on the 27th.
Oh, boy, wow, right there at Thanksgiving.
Yep.
How fun is that?
Yep, yep, this is a big one.
Wow.
Oh gosh.
Wait a minute. So, I'm 70, so which big one are you talking about?
I'm gonna be 50.
Oh,
Happy birthday on the 27th.
you're a baby.
Woohoo. Are you doing anything cool?
Cooking Thanksgiving for a bunch of people,
Hey,
Well, that's fun.
but I do that every year.
that's cool.
It's my holiday. I love it. So, I
Alright.
cook for
Let's get this show on the road.
single woman with no children cooking
Yeah.
for.
You can come cook for me.
Yeah. All
No
right,
objection.
let's get back to business here. So again, I'm gonna work through these and we'll see where we end up. I would expect questions. There is gonna be a bit of a challenge at some point to, figure out from draft 1 to draft 3 where we are, but let's give all this a shot. So, one of the notes I had, first note on the first page at the bottom, just a general note, can the application content requirements for a subdivision application be moved to an appendix? Because as we read through this, as we work through the procedure, which you'll see when we get in here, there's like 6 pages of things that just say this has to be in the application, that has to be in the application, and that, and that, and that, and it goes on and on and on. And at some point, really what you're trying to do is figure out who's supposed to be doing what, not necessarily how to fill out an application. So while it needs to be in the code, I wondered if it would be a better idea to make it an appendix that you could just go to it and go, you know, and it could refer to it and have that in there. But that's, again, that's just my opinion, my preference. I think Keith and Dan should weigh in on some of this and, you know, tell us what they think. So, because you can't really visualize it yet, let's just keep going.
I
Okay,
think that's a good idea.
okay, thank you.
My only thought there is sometimes we wanna, fix an application or amend it, and if it's an appendix, the only way we'd fix it, especially if it's in chapter 14, is to go through an entire public hearing process and all that stuff.
Well, you have to anyway, so I guess what I'm saying is, it is in code right now. If you wanted to change that code, we would have to do what you just said, public hearing and everything. So even if it's in the appendix, it doesn't really change what has to be done to make a modification to the code or the appendix.
No, but you're talking about putting the application.
No, it's not the application,
Oh,
it's the required contents of the application.
oh, I thought you said you'd put copy of the application in the appendix. That's what I thought I heard you say. Okay, then I don't disagree. I withdraw.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so what you said is where we're headed. So we'll read through this and we can come back to that later, I guess. But, see what you think. So as we get into page 7, under 14.02.070, you'll see a comment there about only applies to R1, R1A, and R2, and does it apply to all the zoning districts? And so as I was kind of chomping through that, I'm looking for a clarification on that.
Did you find one?
Well, no, because really, the subdivision review committee only works on R1, R1A, and R2 things, if I'm not mistaken.
We can choose either way.
Okay, so we need to make...
We could choose to have the same subdivision process for a multifamily.
Okay.
Be the same as, because the state code says that we have to streamline the process for R1 and R2 type subdivisions.
Yes.
Single family and dual family dwelling subdivisions, we have to streamline the process. We could choose to have a different process for multifamily, which is more onerous. Personally, my own personal opinion, let's just be consistent with one process so that we're not, you know what I mean, keeping track of two separate processes. But there's a reason why the new state code forces us to do it with those two, because those are more common, and you're gonna sometimes have more scrutiny when it comes to these multifamily housing, developments and things like that.
So, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but because I always like to do that, the other side of the coin on that is, so when we streamline the processes, the net effect is we have the subdivision review committee, and the process is streamlined. It doesn't go to city council, doesn't come to the planning commission. It goes to the SRC, subdivision review committee.
No, it does come to planning commission and we can choose to have a public hearing. It's not required, but we can choose to do so in planning commission. I'm 100% sure.
100%?
100% sure.
Okay, I'd like to, when it comes up in this code, point it out so that we're clear on that. 'Cause
Well, I can point it on that drawing, which shows the 4 cycles,
okay.
and it says planning commission.
Page 25, I think that is, if everybody wants to go there. Or 28, it's, 22, sorry.
Too far.
So right down at the bottom of the second circle, city may hold a public hearing, and that would be by planning commission is the only place to let you do that in that application review process.
And why is it the planning commission? I'm just curious, I don't see that there.
I just remember the different trainings that I went to. They said your city council cannot, you cannot have that public hearing there. Because this subdivision approval process is an administrative act, and the legislature was very keen to not have the legislative body be involved in approving it.
Okay.
So they didn't want to have the public hearing there, so
All right.
that's why they...
So there's also a pre-application meeting with staff or the planning commission, which is sort of what we just did tonight for Juniper Hills. It was sort of like a pre-app meeting. So it started with staff couldn't resolve it, and it came to planning commission, and that's sort of what that was. Okay, so how does everybody...
in the middle of a deadline,
Hmm?
where the planning commission would act, we would be in the middle of a deadline, right? A 30-day deadline.
Yeah, well,
Oh, there's a clock for this whole process,
yeah.
the entire way through.
Yeah, we haven't really got to that yet. So really, at hand, on page 7, I think the question or the guidance that we just have to provide back to, rural consultants so they can finish the code is whether we wanna have one process. And what I was going through is that the trade-off is, so, okay, these will go to planning commission, as Dan said, so I guess I would take my objection off the table. The issue is that the subdivision review committee is a streamlined process, makes a quick decision, and planning and zoning doesn't really make that decision. They can provide comments to the SRC, but they're not gonna participate. So what you have is this higher density thing, which is a big subdivision, and as we've talked earlier, the bigger the subdivision, the more rumble there is about it. And, you know, so it goes through, and that's when everybody's going, where'd that come from? And, you know.
And not that you couldn't have a clause within there that says on an R3 or on a multifamily type subdivision, the planning committee, you could have it, so it's the same streamlined process, but you have the carve out that says on a multifamily, you mandate, you give a deviated process, but keep the majority of the code the same, so we're not fully duplicating the code in one circumstance and another. You know what I'm saying? Keep pretty streamlined code, but you could say, with the exception of multifamily subdivision, these additional steps, and have a paragraph or two.
So I guess I'm challenged by how we're gonna keep track of what we're doing to explain that to rural consultants. I mean, really, that's really the purpose of this. If we don't give them clear direction,
Oh, yeah.
we're gonna come back with you know, yet another round, which takes more time and all
Sure.
of that. So I'm interested in how we're gonna
How to go about it.
figure out we're gonna do that.
Had you put any thought into that when you were writing in that only R1, R2, R3? Had you put any more thought?
I didn't go to the decision step. I just recognized that we needed to figure it out.
Okay. I'm curious as to how the rest of the planning commission feels
Me too.
as whether you would like to have more scrutiny in the code on a multifamily subdivision, on a like, you know, so a subdivision of single-family homes and duplexes, we are stuck at what the state makes us do. We are given the latitude to have more scrutiny, including the clock and everything, for things like PUDs, the subdivision we just talked about earlier tonight, master plan zones, things like that.
I would wanna take the opportunity to, be able to have input where we possibly can.
So be able to have a little more scrutiny
Yeah,
on a more complex subdivision.
Well, and I personally, that's how I feel about it. You know, I look at that and I hate to see stuff that looks like it got snuck through and it went through the right process, but the process is so quick that it can just go boom and it's done. And the more complex it is, I think, the more important it is to, you know.
I think of it as a pressure relief valve, because this subdivision, what's the title? Subdivision Land Use Authority, on a very complex and maybe even high pressure situation, if they're under the gun from a clock standpoint, they're gonna want to be able to have more time to have more review, even if it's legal review of development agreement or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I like the idea of having some pressure release valve on certain types of subdivisions that are more complex.
and for those subdivisions that are more complex, that that wouldn't, follow what we're using for, duplexes and
Yeah.
all the others. Would we be able to set our own timelines, or is that mandated by state?
No, yes, the answer is we would be able to set our own timelines, and it is not mandated by state. I mean, if the subdivision is still pretty straightforward and it has some townhomes in it, it's really not that big of a deal. When you're talking about like a PUD where they're requesting lower width on the streets, they're requesting things that are that normally we wouldn't allow in a standard subdivision, but under a PUD we would. We may want to have some more time to consider those things. And yes, the state code just forces us to improve the timeline on the 1 and 2 or family subdivisions. I just don't want to have an incredibly complex set of code that has an entirely different process one for the other. I would rather have one process that has language in it that basically allows us to take the clock off the table and take review time off the table, and even if we wanted to add a hearing or something, I don't know, a mandated hearing or something like that. I'm wondering if, I'm not wondering, I'm now guessing that we're not the first city to say, yeah, we want to have a little more flexibility on a more complex subdivision. I wonder if Hanson Planning Group has already kind of worked through that with another city, since we're right on the tail end of this, and they probably helped quite a few cities get there. Maybe we could say, what do you have to suggest, because we would like to have some more flexibility on these more difficult subdivisions.
Well, so going forward, another question is, am I gonna provide this feedback, or do you wanna provide the feedback?
I can,
Okay.
but I haven't, have you already given him the feedback that we're looking at?
No, not all of it. I gave him the surface comments, which are, what about this word, what about that word, this misspelling, a comma goes here, and not even all of those.
Okay.
So, I mean, I really gave him just some stuff that said, you might wanna fix these.
Why don't we schedule a call with him, you and I? You can-
Okay.
Yeah, after we get done here tonight, maybe there's some other
Yeah.
feedback.
Okay. There'll be some other things we'll wanna talk about. All right. So, I mean, for me, this particular one now is kinda simple. We're gonna use the fully streamlined process in the R1, the R1A, and the R2, or however they'll word that for us.
Yep.
And then planning and zoning to stay involved in complex subdivisions.
Stay involved, and the ability to remove the clock.
Okay. Move the clock. Okay.
Oops.
So, and I just wanted to point out, while we're here, the Subdivision Land Use Authority, and under this chapter is the Subdivision Review Committee. So going forward in this document, when they talk about the LUA, it's the SRC for these subdivisions. And then we've got, moved on to page 8.
Kelly, I'm gonna give you control back so I can do my own thing here.
Well, let me go back to page 7, just a shout out. And so the bottom of that page, there's 5 items there, and they're continued on to page 8. And it says, for the purpose of subdivision applications, the Subdivision Review Committee shall be responsible for the following. And there's quite a few things there. So it says they're gonna hold the public hearing. Dan, you're indicating that it's gonna be planning and zoning.
It may be planning and zoning, if we choose. They give us the ability to let planning and zoning have a public hearing.
It doesn't say that in here yet.
Okay.
Just heads up, you know,
Okay.
if you wanna flag it or not.
The way I remember the training was, your city council can't be having a planning and, a public hearing. You can choose to have one public hearing
Oh, I'm okay with that, but
at the review at the review level. And now that you're saying that, I don't remember whether they said it would have to be by the subdivision, whatever committee.
Yeah, so at this point in this document, they're saying it is the SRC committee.
Yep. And I remember thinking that that was probably what they intended, because I thought, how do you have a public hearing with a three-person body that can meet any random time? Because they are still public meetings and have to be noticed and all that stuff, so.
So, yep.
Okay.
Providing feedback to applicant, holding pre-app meetings, required, so I flagged keeping subdivision application forms and related informational material up to date. Just, you know, that's a big chore for a three-person committee, in my opinion. And then, I know some of you have staff reach back, but, you know, if you've got a planning and zoning chair on that committee, there's no reach back. So, think about that. And then ensuring that documents are properly recorded with the county. Again, I assume you'd be augmented by city staff, because 3 people trying to keep track of that would be pretty rough, in my opinion. So, you wanna move on from there? We're good? Okay. 14.0, 2.080 subdivision appeals. So, originally, Hanson indicated that they were gonna update chapter, Title 14 subdivision code and Title 15 to make sure they stayed consistent. However, our Board of Adjustments and stuff and our appeals is in Title 15, and so what they did here was just pointed us back to our existing process. If we wanna change that, we're gonna need to advise them. So they're either gonna need to incorporate it here or tell us to go change our Title 15.
My thought is, if that's not within their scope, let's leave it as is. It points to the Board of Adjustments code in 15. We can go update that ourselves to define our new appeal authority. If they're not gonna do it within the scope, let's leave it there. We'll just amend 15.14.090 and fix it to be the new appeal.
Well, they might, I mean, if we ask them, you never know.
If they would, that'd be great.
Yeah, they didn't say they weren't. I've never asked him or approached him about,
Oh, I
hey,
thought
what
you
about
had.
Title 15?
You just said they didn't.
They didn't, and they haven't, and it's clear by now that they don't intend to, or we would have a draft.
Okay, well, there you go.
So all throughout this document, I've moved up to page 9 now. You'll see where preliminary plats are crossed off and concept review plans are, you know, called something different now. I mean, it's quite a different approach to code. But throughout this document, my comment is they've used the word subdivider, they've used the word applicant, they've used the word party, and they've used the word developer. And as far as I could tell, they just did it based on the code that we had, and of course, which was admittedly pretty inconsistent. So I asked them to kind of change that, and we sort of settled on applicant or developer to get away from the word subdivider and just the word party. Not really my decision, but if we want to change it, all we need to do is tell them, and that's a word search, and they can go fix it. I don't know, feedback on that, anybody's thoughts?
I like applicant myself.
Yeah, I like applicant too.
Okay. Yeah, you'll see on page 10, there's a couple examples. If a party requests a pre-app meeting, that's clearly gonna not be a party, it's gonna be the applicant.
I don't mean to interrupt, and maybe this is not my place, but we're on page 9 of 60. Are we planning on going through this page by page, or was the recommendation that
Right.
we staff get together? you get together with staff, or that we have some of
Well, I'd be happy, I'm open for suggestions if somebody wants to do that. At some point, this committee has to make a recommendation.
maybe we could do it then at a special meeting, it's 9:10, and we still have other agenda meetings.
So you mentioned special meeting, that's what it would take if we're gonna hit our timeline by the end of the year. Which could work too. But this is the timeline. We review it tonight. We need to have something to present, something to put out there for the public to look at as we then do a public hearing on it. Next meeting, which is the first meeting in December. And then the city council only meets once in December, and that meeting is after our next planning commission meeting. And we have to have this updated by the end of the year. There's no penalty for not. We're just not compliant with the state law if we don't have it updated by that point. And I'm not throwing anybody under the bus, but you can see developers, they get really demanding when you're not got all your stuff in a row, and most of the larger cities have had to have this done for some time. So they're like, you haven't updated your code yet? No, we're not required to, but before the end of the year. Well, we have different developments that are being considered and ongoing, and so it is a priority, which means we probably would want to do a special meeting, given the fact that it is 9:30 and we have a lot to go. But that's just my input. That's the timeline problem.
Well, I'm willing for any of that if people are up to it, and the question is it gonna be, we have to make the decision, is it gonna be a staff meeting and the staff works through the recommendations and then we bring a clean draft back to planning and zoning? And just sort of a briefing that says, here's what we're doing?
We could also have a special, we could also have a special city council meeting. Normally, every month we have two. It's just that we cancel the second one in December because it's near the holidays. We could have a special city council meeting like December 28th or something like that for the purposes of adopting this, which would give planning commission one more regularly scheduled meeting to work through this.
Right, and it also makes some assumptions on the demands we'll place on Hanson and Associates, because we're not their only client.
Sure.
Just, factor that in. But, yeah, I'm up for that, I'm open for suggestions. I'm retired, so I'm available for things like that. I think other members of the commission ought to have jobs and things and might not be available during the day.
Wednesday and Sunday, that's all I've got during the day.
What's that, Wednesday or Sunday?
Yeah. I would rather
Wait.
have a different meeting.
Where's the pizza?
Well, and we're tired, and if we push,
Yeah.
you're gonna get the best result. Haste makes waste, yeah.
So then when?
So if we have a second meeting in December for the city council, then we're not under such a time crunch. But we can't really make that decision tonight, but I'm looking at the person who calls those meetings. I mean, we could do that. We may have reason to do that anyways. I don't know if we will or not, but
So, let me just so that I understand, so we would have a meeting to work through this code.
Mhm.
We would do that, and then we would return that to Hanson and Associates with or rural consultants, I should say, with recommendations. They'd provide a clean draft.
which we'd
And
have a
then
public
we-
hearing on.
Pardon?
Which we would have a public hearing on.
Right, so I guess what I'm asking, so when do we think the public hearing is, at the next P and Z meeting?
So let me walk us through the actual calendar.
Cause it's December 18th is the last one in December.
So we have two planning commission meetings in December,
The 2nd and the 18th?
is the 4th
Fourth.
and the 18th. Normally, if we were to have two city council meetings, it would be scheduled the day after Christmas.
Hmm.
And that's the problem. but we could do one on the 30th, which is a Monday, or even the 31st. And that's as long as we have a quorum and we don't have people going out of town. Or we could do it on the 27th, which is a Friday or something. I mean, if we didn't have any other things on the agenda, and if the planning commission had done all the work and the public hearing, it could be a pretty quick city council meeting to take care of that. It's not a huge burden on the city council, but they're my bosses, so I really don't wanna make them angry, but I think that would free us up. What it would do, of course, today's the 20th, it would give us 2 weeks for everybody to go through and review this, to have a dedicated, not dedicated, but have a work meeting where we could spend a little bit more time on this. Then that would give Hanson Planning 2 weeks, or actually, we'd wanna have it pretty close, and they could give us a clean copy, and would have a public hearing on the 18th. And then have a city council meeting to adopt it sometime near the end of the year.
So this work meeting, is it our regular P and Z meeting, or are we gonna meet, additional time, or is staff going over this?
What did you say about Wednesdays and Sundays?
Are the only times I'm available during the day.
I'm available anytime.
No, I mean, I'm available a lot of time, but not any time. There's some plans here and there.
Yeah. What about you, Eston?
I have a 10-hour day job,
Oh, yeah.
5 days a week, and sometimes 6.5.
Yeah.
So,
Would it
running
be,
this week out, I'm not available Friday, I'm not available Monday, and probably not Tuesday till later in the day.
Well, if we have the city council meeting, the extra one, or even do it January 9th, and we'd be out of compliance for 9 days, we can just do this within the context of our regular meetings.
Do you think we can get through this
In a regular meeting
Right.
with,
We were gonna try and do it tonight, but in a regular
Well,
meeting,
Yeah, I was gonna kick us out of here by 10 o'clock if we
yeah.
finished or not, but like I say, this little discussion where we are now, I mean, we've got quite a few more pages to go. And some of them are decisions like we've had to work through.
I think we try to keep most everything else off the agenda that can be kept off the agenda. We do still have Connex code that we need to talk about. If we had that and this only on the next agenda, we may have an application or something, but I don't
Yeah,
know of anything out there, hanging out there. Keith
Yeah,
is
I
shaking
would-
his head no too.
Yeah, I would not, I think working through this, if we've had a meeting in between our work meeting, we might be able to do this in Connex code, but I think if we just bring in this subdivision code, I'm not sure that we can work through that and Connex code in a reasonable amount of time. Unless everybody comes really well prepared to discuss storage container code.
Unless we just burn the Connex code, that would be an efficient way to get through it.
We sorta had a suggestion that that be done, so,
Well, I'll make the motion.
well, I'm thinking the city council would get tarred and feathered if they had to support that kind of motion.
Oh, it's here on the option list.
How about, can we just meet
Not be
next
too
Wednesday
radical of an idea.
night, afternoon, after Weston's off work?
What was that?
that's what I was wondering, does it have to be during the day?
no, I was just saying that
After,
if
like,
it's
next
during the day,
Wednesday.
Yeah.
it'd have to be those 2 days if it was during the day, for me to be included.
So, I mean, I'm open for it, if we need to if we wanna have a special meeting or work meeting, whatever we wanna call it. If it needs to be Wednesday night, I think, or Wednesday afternoon sometime, I think that's great. I would love that.
We just have one next week.
Yeah.
Just 6 o'clock.
Yeah, Wednesday at 6.
Wednesday?
It's the day before Thanksgiving, will everybody be
Oh,
here?
no, I'm
Thanksgiving.
cooking.
Will everybody be here?
I'm cooking.
Well, maybe it should be Tuesday then.
Did you know it was Thanksgiving?
No,
I'm
I
questionable Tuesday, so straight out, I'm having my heart cath on Monday, and if it comes
Oh.
out good, I'm good. If it doesn't, I won't be here. So,
Is there any way we could meet
I don't have to be here, actually, I mean,
These are all your notes. You need to be here, yeah.
think you need to be here.
but I think if you read the text around those notes,
Okay, let's look for another option. Well, that's option
Alright.
B. Well,
okay.
so, okay, let's start. Today's Wednesday. Can people meet tomorrow night? No. Friday?
What's tomorrow? Thursday?
Okay. Friday? No.
You can do it.
Saturday?
I won't be in,
No.
I won't be in
Okay.
town on Friday.
Yeah.
So now we're at Monday night.
No, I'm not in.
Oh, you won't 'cause your cat, the heart, okay. So then we're back to Black Friday.
Well, Tuesday's potential for me, if everything goes well.
December 3rd or December 26th, or November 26th?
November, oh,
That's Tuesday.
are we that far into the month? Gee.
Mhm.
You're talking evening,
Mhm.
okay.
Otherwise, it'd be after Thanksgiving,
Tuesday the
Friday, Saturday.
26,
Yeah, can we just plan on Tuesday the 26th unless Larry
Larry,
has a problem with it?
And evening, 'cause I
Yeah.
can't do
Yes.
the day,
Yeah, evening.
Yeah,
okay.
Tuesday the 26th.
this next Tuesday.
yep.
All right.
At 6:00?
need to be here, everything will come out good.
Yeah, we have faith, everything's gonna be great.
I think so. Okay,
And then if not, then we'll have to figure it out from there.
all right. So I need a recommendation, I guess, need a motion to do that, and,
Are we tabling
adjourn.
Connex as well?
yeah, well, we need a couple motions, I guess. We need to table this discussion pending a special meeting on Tuesday, the whatever.
11/26 at 6.
Yeah, and then we'll table the recommendation to table the,
Okay.
Connex discussion.
I make a motion that we table the discussion on subdivision code draft review until and reconvene on a special meeting Tuesday, November 26th at 6 o'clock to work through everything.
Do I have a second?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
I make,
go ahead.
they fought over it down there,
So I
so.
seconded it.
Okay, well, what about the con?
I make a motion,
Oh, let's just,
oh, sorry.
can you give us a 2-minute summary of why this is on the agenda now?
You bet.
Did the city council request it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just bear with me for a minute. So, there's been rumblings here and there, and finally, they said the way to get this started is to get the city council to request that planning and zoning take a peek at some of the provisions in the, container code. And so, in the last city council meeting we got that. You all have a handout, right?
Mhm.
Did I give you all that handout?
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm not gonna get into it. So, the council said, yeah, we wanna do that, and they threw out some concepts that in provisions that were in that code that they think we could take another look at. So we shouldn't interpret that as direction to, hey, you have to change this and give us a positive recommendation. We need to exercise due diligence, we'll have to work through this. We'll have to have a public hearing. And some of the suggestions, quite frankly, can have unintended consequences, so we need to take the deep dive into that to make sure we, don't end up in space we don't wanna be in. there may be other concerns in code that we look at and go, why are we doing this? And we are welcome to make recommendations on those as well. And so that's the story of why we are considering that at this point. It's been mentioned that when this was done back in, if you look at the bottom of the page of the code, it tells you when it was revised, I think in September or so of 2019.
Yeah.
Was the revision. You know, there was civil wars practically over this code. And a couple planning and zoning members ultimately resigned as a result of interactions from this particular piece of code, and community was very opinionated, let's just say that. So we possibly could expect a pretty serious, well-attended public hearing. And I would, questions, comments about any of that?
So it seems like to prepare for when we discuss this, it's kind of all contained here. Look at the existing code, look at these areas that the city council has said they like us to consider, or something we might consider, and
Exactly.
would be prepared.
So the fastest way to move through that, of course, we can't ever escape the interaction that we have, because that's, healthy. But the really good thing would be to sit down and look at those questions and look at that code. It's all there in a nice little package. And come back with questions, comments, and think about how we might pull that together. And then I suspect we'd walk away. I might, codify your concepts or your recommendations, and then bring something back for a public hearing. Because we wouldn't have a public hearing before we propose the changes.
So you're gonna do that in this special meeting too?
No, there's no time deadline on this. We don't have to have it done by the end of the year. So I don't see the point in having a special meeting to do that.
But it needs to be done.
Oh, absolutely.
On our next meeting, yeah.
Yeah, well, we're having another meeting on the 18th. We can put it on the agenda.
The 18th?
You mean
December.
the 4th?
What about?
Well, on the 4th also.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll put it on the agenda for the 4th, and if we have enough time and can get to it, that'd be great. Again, dig in, please, in the meantime, so that we can be productive.
Tell you, option one's
Well, you'd have time if you don't load it up with too much other stuff.
Yeah, that's generally, yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so I can do it now?
Yes.
Make a motion, okay, I'm making a motion that we, remove the Connex code revision to tonight's meeting to the next planning and zoning meeting on December 4th at 6 o'clock.
Agreed. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We should have, before we pull the last one, we're gonna skip reports, so.
But Keith missed out last time. You're gonna break his heart.
Are you ready? All right, we'll have reports next time. All right, I'll accept that final motion.
We don't have any other reports? Oh.
Any other member reports? Dave, you got anything? Jamie? Troy? Heather?
I have nothing else to report. I was just gonna say, I know tonight several times, it was brought up about people talking over each other. Something for me personally, I wanted to just put out there is that I find it very distracting. I am like neurospicy when people are up and walking around and having separate conversations, whether it's up here or out there. And so I get distracted and then I miss stuff. And so anyway, just wanted to ask for that courtesy.
I'll try and manage that better. I get to listening to all of that, and I neglect to smack the gavel or call the meeting back to order, because we do have a lot of interrupters from time to time.
But I have nothing else.
Okay, Do I, Weston, anything? Nope. Dan? Nope. All right, time for the final motion, 'cause
I make a
haven't-
motion that we adjourn for the evening.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Also, when you come to that work meeting, please bring these handouts, 'cause they are up there.
Not print them again. I will just cry over the lost tree.
Yeah, I told Callie I planted another tree after she printed these for me.